I'd like to welcome you to the Planning Commission hearing of February 12th, 2020. Before we get started, we have a lot of people here, which is great. We love to get feedback from the public. If you wish to speak tonight, if you could please fill out one of these white cards and pass it to the front here, so we've got it. If you wish to deliver comments without speaking, you can do so on this card as well. You don't have to do this. This just helps facilitate the public hearing portion of our meeting tonight. We've got a couple of items to discuss that are more business related. Then we'll get to the we will get to the public hearing. The agenda items where we have public hearings. So just bear with us for a few minutes while we get through our business, and we'll get to that. And I'll have some additional directions before we open the public hearings. The mic is on, but I'll move it closer. Is that better? Okay. Okay. First item on our agenda would be the minutes for the meeting of January 22nd, 2020.
I'll move we accept the minutes from the last meeting.
Second. Great, we've got a motion by Maureen, a second by Brenda. Let me get to my page. Let's start with Andreas.
Yay.
Sarah?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Brenda?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Carolyn?
Abstain.
Okay. Maureen?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. Now our next item would be the report of the chair and the vice chair. I have nothing to report.
I have nothing to report.
Okay, thank you. Now we have the report of the director, and Molly is here to deliver that.
Thank you. Yes, so there's a couple of items. I don't know what's first. Changes to the Planning Commission policies and procedures. I'm going to suggest that we
Table?
maybe, well,
Oh, you wanna
one,
discuss?
we don't have a memo or something for you to read, but we would like to kind of introduce it to all of the commission members.
Okay.
But maybe we can talk about it at the end of the meeting, and then we'll set it up for for a decision at the next meeting. And that way we can potentially incorporate your comments and suggestions into into those policies and procedure changes, so we can kind of do it all at once next week or in 2 weeks.
Okay, do you need a motion from us to do anything for that?
No.
No, okay.
We're going to move it to the end of the agenda.
We're going to move it to
here.
the end of if that's okay with you, Madam Chair.
Any concerns from the commission? That works for us.
That will save all these people some heartache as well, or headache, rather. And then the other item on the agenda is a plan development extension request at approximately 563 and 567 East 600 South. I believe the applicant is here. We need to make a motion for that, or we're not going to do a presentation. Yeah. Amy, do you want to join us and maybe set up what the request is and your recommendation?
So the request is for an extension. It was a plan development that was approved back in March 28th of 2018. The commission granted a 1-year time extension February 13th, 2019. There's a memo in the Dropbox with all the information, including the staff report from that date. The plan development was granted for creating a lot without street frontage and reductions of setbacks. So the commission, we're just asking that the commission grant a 1-year time extension. So that would extend the approval out to March 28th, 2021. And I can answer any specific questions if you have them. I just didn't want to.
What's been the delay, Amy?
The applicant indicated that they had some issues with fire requirements, and then they also recently ran into some issues with Rocky Mountain Power. They have submitted their preliminary plat that was approved, and now they're working on submitting their final plat. So they have made progress since those extensions, but It also went through the Landmark Commission, and the Landmark Commission granted a second extension on January 3rd, 2020.
Okay, any questions from the commission? Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we grant the extension.
Thank you, Sarah.
I'll
Motion by
second that.
Motion by Sarah, second by Carolyn. Okay, Andreas?
Yay.
Sarah?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Yes.
Brenda?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Carolyn?
Agree.
Maureen?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now we will move on to the public hearing portion of our meeting. Just a couple of reminders for the public hearing and how our process works. For zoning map amendments and master plan amendments, they come before the Planning Commission for a recommendation to the City Council. So we are not the final decision-making body for a proposed zoning map amendment change. We take input from the public, we get feedback from the planning staff. We base our decision or recommendation to the City Council based on all of those factors, but primarily based on planning-related principles, how the proposal is or is not consistent with city policies, what impacts the proposal would have on adjacent properties. Those are the types of issues that we take into account when formulating our recommendation. So during the public hearing portion, of course, you can deliver your comments as you see fit, but those are the issues that speak to us when we're formulating our recommendation. As part of the process tonight, planning staff will make a presentation to us on the applications. We will then ask the applicant to come forward, who will have 10 minutes to present to us. We will then open the public hearing. We will ask if there is a member of the community council here to speak on behalf of or with respect to an application. The community council member will have 5 minutes. We then will open it up to the general public. We'll go through the cards. Each person will have 2 minutes to deliver your public comments. We ask just to keep the process moving. If a comment has already been made from another member of the public, that we don't have a lot of repetition, you can simply agree with what has already been said. That will just facilitate the flow of the evening. So with that, we'll move on to the zoning map and master plan amendment for 159 South Lincoln, 949, 955, 959, 962 East, 200 South, which are case numbers PLN PCM 2019-00683 and PLN PCM 2019-00684. And we have Kelsey.
Good evening, Commissioners. So, as Madam Chair explained, this is a zoning map and master plan amendment. The applicants are requesting to amend the Central Community Future Land Use Map and the zoning map for the properties located at 159 South Lincoln, 949, 955, 959, and 963 East, 200 South. The applicants are seeking to amend the master plan from low-density residential, which is 1 to 15 dwelling units per acre, to medium-density residential, which is 15 to 30 dwelling units per acre. Additionally, the zoning map amendment is requested from the existing R2, which is a single and two-family zoning district, to RMF 35, which is a moderate-density residential. The subject properties are located on the northern side of 200 South between Lincoln Street and 1000 East. The proposal encompasses 5 properties totaling 0.682 acres. Currently, there are 9 residential units within the 5 properties. Here are the photos of the properties: 949 Second South, 955 Second South, 959. This is an angle of 959 and 963. 963 Second South, the Lincoln Street elevation of 949, and 159 Lincoln. The Central Community Master Plan Future Land Use Map designated the subject properties as low-density residential, which is 1 to 15 dwelling units per acre, and the existing R2 designation aligns with the current designation found on the Future Land Use Map at 10 dwelling units per acre. The requested amendment to medium-density residential, which is 15 to 30 dwelling units per acre, does not align with the goals or policy statements within the Central Community Master Plan. The proposed amendments would double the permitted number of units under the future land use designation and the allotment under the current R2. As evidenced in attachment F, the analyzed adopted master plan documents provide some neutral and non-supportive policy statements in regard to the proposed amendments. The neutral policy statements generally support growth and development. However, there are a number of non-supportive policy statements which are in direct conflict with the requests. The conflicting policies address compatibility, appropriate density for specific areas of the city, and preservation of existing housing stock. As noted, the applicants are requesting to amend the R2 to an RMF 35. The zoning varies in this area. There is higher density zoning along the 700 East corridor. However, it generally reduces in scale and density further east along 200 South. This is evidenced by the illustration of the existing zoning map. The neighborhood does include a variety of residential uses, which range from single-family detached to multifamily. As noted, the zoning map designates the subject properties as R2. As outlined in the staff report and found in attachment E, the following are the comparisons of the R2 and the RMF 35 zoning district. The primary differences that are discussed within the report are permitted land uses, scale, height, massing, and setbacks. The subject properties are adjacent to low-density residential to the east, west, and the north. The proposed RMF 35 zoning district could result in a development that is not compatible in terms of height, massing, and scale with the adjacent properties. There are several identified issues with the proposed amendments as outlined within the staff report. The identified issues include the existing master plan policies for the area and the proposed zoning, the difference between the R2 and the requested RMF 35, and the loss of the structures within a National Historic District. Additionally, staff provided the analysis of the standards to amend the zoning map, and the standards, the requested amendments are not consistent with the adopted standards. Those are in attachment G. Additionally, the public has provided a number of identified issues and concerns with the proposals. There are concerns that reflect the existing multifamily use, concerns that include the loss of the existing housing and replacement with market rate housing, and a fear that the existing tenants would be displaced by the amendments and the redevelopment of the subject properties. In summary, the proposed amendments would facilitate the development of a multifamily residential building on the subject properties. The master plan's general policies and objectives for this area do not support the higher density development. The plans call for stability for the lower density designations. The properties are adjacent to low density residential to the east, west, and north, as mentioned. And the proposed zoning for the RMF 35 could result in a development that is not compatible. Thus, staff is recommending that the Planning Commission forward a negative recommendation to the City Council.
Thank you, Kelsey.
I
Any
can
que- any
answer any
questions for
questions.
Kelsey? None at this time? Okay. And is the applicant here? Okay.
If folks want to take a seat over at the table, I know it's weird, but we have seats over here, so.
Come on up. It's a PDF, so just go.
Oh, it's a PDF?
Oh, it is. It is a problem.
It's not a huge problem. It's
It is
fine.
a problem.
Okay. I have a thumb drive.
No,
I can
it's
drop
okay.
in there. Cool slide effects.
Sorry. No, that's okay. It's just really big, so it was having issues
Cool.
with like moving through.
Oh, really? So you're good to go? No.
And please make sure just to state your name for the record and speak into the microphone.
Yes, okay. So thank you for this opportunity to come and talk to you. My name is Chowie Hoy, and I am here to speak with you about this specific application. So the content of what I will talk about today, I'll talk about the location. I know Kelsey's talked about that a little bit. I want to show you the current structures. I want to also let you know the explored considerations that we've had, the proposed plans, the evaluation criteria that I think you should take into consideration, and then the benefits that we believe this will bring to the community. Am I speaking loud enough? Is that okay. Okay, so with the 5 units, oh, I don't have the pointer. That's okay. Okay. So with the 5 units, we do have 5 structures. We do have 9 units, and to give you some context, this is 949 here. Can you point? 949 is there, 955, 959, 963, and then 159 Lincoln Street is behind in the back. So the current structures, these are pictures of the current structures. Again, the white house is 949, the brown house is 955, the blue house is 959. The smaller red home is 963. What you also see next to it is actually a commercial property. And the bottom picture is the back of the units. And so with that, you can also see that there's currently very little green space. There's certainly room for revitalization. And at this point, this is not in the historic preservation overlay. This is the picture of 159 Lincoln Street from the front. And then the bottom picture is actually, it looks a little weird. I took a panoramic photo with my phone, and that's why there's that weird effect. But I know that it has been noted that there's a lot of small, low-density, single-family homes. But this is the street where Lincoln Street is, and that's certainly much smaller than 200 South. 159, you'll see the arrow pointing down. It's kind of where that big pine tree is. But there are commercial properties. There's a commercial parking lot that feeds into the medical offices along 10th East. And then there's also several multifamily structures along Lincoln Street already. Okay. So, excuse me, some of the things that we have explored. So we are experienced homeowners. We've actually had a home in the area since 2003, and we are property owners, so we have investment properties as well. I also have a certificate in real estate from Cornell, and we've repaired and restored 3 homes, specifically in the University Historic District and also in the Avenues neighborhoods. The original plan was to remodel and repair the existing 5 structures, so the 9 units. And it was to do it to have a more family-friendly floor plan with environmentally friendly features. And what that means is family-friendly floor plans, which parents who have young children, they can always have a line of sight of their little kids because they need constant care and supervision. And then more environmentally friendly, because these houses were built in the 1900s, nothing is energy efficient with these homes. And so we wanted to do that update. We immediately ran into several roadblocks. The first was the scope of the remodel that we wanted to do would have triggered the requirement from the city to bring all structures to the current seismic code, which led us to talk to a structural engineer and ask for a structural engineering report. Based upon the structural engineering report, it was recommended that building new structures would certainly be more structurally sound, but also more financially viable. And so with that, we went ahead and started to consider, well, what is something new that would work within that neighborhood? And immediately, this is an overhead map of the neighborhood. The area in red is the rezone area, so the 5 plots. And you can see immediately there's a significant amount of commercial as well as multifamily, like large multifamilies, just in the immediate walkable area. Okay. And so with that, again, taking a look at what we had, we decided with this plan. So we had some careful consideration of what was already there on 200 South, where most of the public interaction would be. And we set about to create a comparable structure. And so we also made sure that, that there were front doors along Lincoln Street as well. Okay. So the proposed plan, we are taking from 9 units to 16 units. We are committed to energy efficient appliances, energy efficient build materials, electric vehicle chargers in all the garages, bike racks, and a designated affordable housing unit. And we're excited to say that we're working with Pacific Core Power, specifically with their solar panel and utility controlled battery storage. They had a pilot program out in Harriman with a complex called the Soleil Lofts. Our project will be the only in Salt Lake City and the first in Salt Lake City at this point. And basically, so with standard solar panels, while they do generate energy for the homeowner, there's no effective way to store that energy, so that at peak use hours, when there isn't necessarily a lot of light, solar paneled homes are still using power from the grid like everyone else, and not necessarily solar power. With this program, it will allow the utility to properly store the collected solar power energy and send it out back to the grid at peak times, which is what makes this a very unique net zero benefit. So I want to give you the site plan. It does look a little bit different than what Kelsey had presented. It wasn't the big U. It is laid out in 3 separate rows, and we're proposing 16 units, 3 of which are 3-bedroom, 2-car garage units, which one of them will be the affordable housing designated unit. We have 12 2-bedroom, 2-car garage units, and 1 1-bedroom, 1-car garage unit. In addition to that, we have 4 parking stalls for visitors. We have significantly more green space. That has been a priority. And then because of the accessibility, we are only half a block away from both eastbound and westbound bus stops. We are also including bike racks on site. And then we had a neighborhood survey done by the architect to ensure that it is compatible in terms of aesthetics with the neighborhood. And so that include brick exterior, and we also took in some public, during the open house, we had some comments as well that we've taken into consideration. And so that's a brick exterior, mansard roofs, certain architectural elements that people brought to our attention. We did want to make sure that there was engagement with the street. We had ample parking. We had accessibility. Sustainability was, again, a big deal for us, green space. And this new property will be professionally managed by a property management company.
I think you have about 2 more minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So with the evaluation criteria, there's these five that are consideration for the proposal, and we believe that we more than adequately meet all 5. So whether the proposed map amendment is consistent with purposes, we think that it does. I know that Kelsey had cited the community master plan. We specifically looked at Plan Salt Lake because it was adopted in 2015 rather than started in 1994, nearly 3 decades ago. And so with that, specifically with the RMF 35, it says, quote, by creating spaces with a diverse mix of use, building types, so people have a choice of where they live and how they live. Medium density, because specifically density and compact development are important principles of sustainable growth. And since I have limited time, we'll just skip ahead. Whether or not it furthers the specific statements of the zoning ordinance, we believe it does, because according to the City Code 21A 24010, the residential districts are intended to provide a range of housing choices to meet the needs of Salt Lake City's citizens and to offer a balance of housing types and densities. And then furthermore, the purpose of an RMF 35, which we again fill with further, is to include a moderate density multifamily residential district. To the extent to which the proposed map amendment will affect adjacent properties, we believe that this will minimally impact adjacent properties. Again, two adjacent properties are commercial properties, one which has an underground medical facility parking garage. All the proposed dwellings will have a 35-foot permission. Was that time?
It's time. You just
Okay.
quickly
Yep.
close.
So I'm just going to skip over to the benefits. So we support the growth initiatives and housing initiatives by Plan Salt Lake 2015 by adding medium-density housing stock in a high-growth area. We are designating a unit for affordable housing, which also further the housing initiatives. It supports Plan Salt Lake's first guiding principle that neighborhoods provide a safe environment, because we are certainly increasing, we're bringing in more families into the neighborhood, which is the goal, and that was part of the floor planning. That impacts walkability, neighborhood engagement, as well as area school funding. And then we are engaged with sustainable green building. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions for the applicant?
Yes, you said that you had had a seismic report completed. Do we have a copy of that seismic report?
I have a redacted copy that I can provide to you. There was concerns from our structural engineer to provide it because both my husband and I have been subject to anonymous harassment since this process began, and our structural engineer was concerned that he would be subject to the same thing.
And for the record, that you're not proposing a specific plan. This is simply a zoning amendment for consideration. So you've presented a plan that's a concept that could be constructed if the zoning amendment was approved, but the application is not tied to your presentation of your layout.
We are also happy to sign what was that called?
Plans agreement.
A memorandum agreement so that we don't change the proposal and the plans significantly. Quite frankly, we are private homeowners. We're not a development company. We don't have the monetary resources to continually change these plans with an architect.
No, understood, but just what's up for consideration right now is a zoning map amendment and that's not tied to a specific development proposal.
That's correct. If there was a development agreement discussion, that would happen at the city council level. Mhm.
Correct. Okay. Any other questions for the applicant?
Yeah, you might have gotten cut short, and so for me, I'm particularly interested in the standards. And the question before the commission is whether or not RMF 35 is more appropriate or the same as, or more appropriate for this site than the current zoning R2.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I understood how your plan and your vision for the project. I just wonder if there's anything else you want to say, kind of why you feel that this site is more appropriate as RMF 35. I have no doubt that your project meets the criteria of RMF 35. But why is this site more appropriately zoned RMF 35 than R2 as is now?
Because the R2, excuse me, the R2 zoning was artificially overlaid over this specific block. 2005, is that when that happened?
It was in 1995.
1995, excuse me. And so there's a lot of the commercial and the multifamily units that are already there. One thing I didn't specifically point out, there's like a nursing home, there's really large apartment buildings just around the corner. This area is a mixed use with a lot of RMF 35 type buildings anyway, and the R2 was just kind of stuck up on top of it. And so that's why it would be compatible, because that's just what's already all around. Adjacent, right? Adjacent's the commercial, and then even just a few houses down the street was the other multifamily. There's multifamilies across the street, around the corner, and so that's why I feel that the RMF 35 isn't a stretch from what could be there, and it would fit very well.
So I have a question for Kelsey. What if in the R2 zone? What do you have a height limit on that?
I believe it's 28 feet.
28. Okay, and because there's 5 lots, that would assume 10 units could be built there, correct? If everything went away, 10 units could be built there.
That is not correct. Under the R2, they could get 7 units.
Why not 10? They have 5 lots.
Because they don't meet the square footage requirement for an R2 to have 10 units. So in an R2
Alright.
zoning district, it requires 5,000 square feet for a detached single family and 8,000 for a duplex.
Okay.
And so with I think they have 27,000 square feet. They could have approximately 7 units. There's a process that they could potentially go through to keep the number of units and rebuild the structures. Since it's considered a non-conforming use, we have a section of the code that could deal with that. They'd have to keep a certain percentage of the structures, each structure, to recognize that use within the structure.
Thank you.
Okay, thank
So
you.
we would reduce from 9 to 7 units then if it stayed as an R2.
If all 5 properties were wiped clean, yes, then you could have 7 units.
Any other questions at this point? Okay. We'll now move on to the public hearing portion. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
If you just a reminder, if you haven't filled out a card and would like to speak, please bring your card forward, and we will call your name as part of the hearing. Everyone will have 2 minutes to present. If there's a representative here from the community council, he or she will have 5 minutes. And then as you speak, please make sure to state your name for the record in the microphone. Please also try not to talk in the background. It creates noise and it makes it hard for us to hear, and it makes it hard for the recording to take effect. And then also, after we hear from everyone, we will close the public hearing, and at that point, we will talk amongst ourselves as the commission. We might ask staff to come back and ask questions. We might ask questions of the applicant. But at that time, we ask that you not speak from the audience. We've heard from everyone, and we will take your comments into consideration. Okay, so we have someone from the community council.
Hi, my name is Esther Hunter. I'm chair of the East Central Community Council, and you've received several documents from us in your packets. This was the largest electronic response on a survey as far as impacts from the community that we've ever had. We've had 700 plus responses that came in. That was just unbelievable. This area is significant to the neighborhood. It's significant and would have significant impact at change from the R2. This is the heart of the university neighborhood inside of East Central with 2nd South. It leads up to the Park Building at the U. This is a significant visual impact. We have these particular structures were built in 1890. These were homes. They are significant. We have a historic district that goes to 11th East, and we look to expand it down to 9th East. These houses were, in fact, reviewed with intensive level surveys. 4 of the 5 were considered contributory, and those were all in the packet. The university neighborhood and also East Central strongly supports the housing plan and understands that we have need for housing. We have dozens and dozens of properties in our area that are zoned RMF 45, 65, 35 that can easily be developed. We do not need to also rip into the neighborhood, into the houses, to actually tear down houses and develop them. We included those maps in your packets, and we hope that you've had a chance to look at them. This is a difficult particular application. These folks have been neighbors. They have another house that is close in the area. But what's also difficult, I guess I would ask you to consider, if you have a car for over 20 years and you fail to put oil in, and then 20 years later you expect it to actually run, it would be kind of ridiculous to expect that. You would have a problem. The same thing with these houses. How well these houses by this family that they've had for over 20 years have been maintained has been an impact to the neighborhood as well. So the amount of problems that we've had in the area with some of the folks that live there, and a real concern is when we talk about low-income housing for the area, I was invited by some of the tenants that actually live in these houses to come in and see their living situation. It was disgusting. black mold problems. There's no good egress. The amount of living problems that were inside were crazy. So some of our neighbors, of course, are concerned about the living conditions here, but that is not a reason to rezone and tear down housing. That is a property management issue. One of the things that I tried to do for almost a year was meet with these applicants to talk about options. Everything from city funds to tax incentives to developers who are willing to buy the houses and give them funds so that just a half a block away, there were 5 properties that came up that were already zoned RMF 45 that they could develop there. We tried to come up with every solution that would be possible. The concern I have is that things weren't always really, in my mind, and I'm saying this for me, honest. And what often happened, one lady who was a tenant from California, 3 kids under 6 years old, was told that it was a 2-bedroom apartment that she was renting for what she was paying. When she came, she found the black mold, et cetera, sewer leaking from the ceiling. She could not live there. She went out to the back lot. And instead, what happened when they found out that I had talked to her and that I had been let inside, she was evicted. So we're talking about displacing low-income housing. The actual count that I received from the tenants was 50 people. And the county shows 9 different bedrooms, whether that's officially legal or not, but we're talking about displacing people who have the need for this level of rent, but they also have a right to a clean and good living condition. So, but that's a separate issue from whether or not we should, because they're not properly managed, we should tear them down and we should actually cause a problem. I know you're aware of all the things that are available. I did bring a handout about preservation related to what can all be done related to foundations and water damage and et cetera. I do want to just pass that to you. There are dozens of technical briefs. We've all done it. We all live in houses. Mine was built in 1888. We all live in houses in the area that need substantial work. But you have to keep it up, you have to do it, and there are options that are available.
Great, thank you.
Do you have any questions for me?
No, thank you.
On
We'll take your
anything that we
commentary.
provided, the materials? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. First card is for Mark. Thank you, Mark Bunce. Make sure to state your name and you'll have 2 minutes.
That's all right. Again, my name is Mark Bunce. I'm hoping that the owners of these properties are here to listen to the community sentiment and support of protecting these historical homes. Several of us here own homes dating to the early years of the 20th century, and we all have had to make large investments for upgrades and maintenance. None of us have allowed our homes to fall into decline over 30 years as these properties have, all the while we're receiving large rental income from them. The city has advocated towards rehab, recycle, and reuse of existing buildings for housing, which fits perfectly into these properties. I'm sure that there are several housing developers who are willing to purchase these homes and rehab them to a high contemporary standard in a great neighborhood like this. I want you to vote no for the rezone, and if they need advice, here's a card that I get one of these at least 3 times a week, regarding they want to buy my house. So, thank you.
Thank you. I'm just ask everyone not to applaud. We're just here to get your feedback and your input and to keep the process moving forward. I appreciate that you all are out and this is a very important issue to you, but to maintain decorum here, I'd ask we just also maintain a bit of silence from the audience. The next card is Degina Toyne, and I apologize if I'm butchering your name. Is she here? All right, we'll put her on hold. Paul Toyne? Did you sort these by? Oh. Monica Hilding.
think I fumbled with my shuffling. I shouldn't have. Redo it.
Thank you.
Does it matter which of these I
No, just make sure to state your name and you'll have 2 minutes.
okay. All right, so beginning now.
Yes.
My name is Monica Hilding. My historic Victorian home is directly adjacent to these properties. I have put 30 years of my life into my home and its garden. I've personally collected almost 300 signatures on a petition that is included in the staff report on page 211. This map indicates which of my neighbors have signed the petition, pages 212 through 241. Those residences not highlighted were those I was unable to contact, as apartment buildings accessible only to residents, small businesses, and institutions like Salt Lake Regional Hospital. Of all the doors I knocked on, only 2 people refused to sign. Pink represents 3 or more signings at that address. Green indicates 2 signers, and orange represents 1 signature. Many of those who signed were unable to join us tonight due to work and other commitments. The map and the results of East Central Community Council's survey show the vast majority of residents are against this zoning change. Look at the Central Community Future Land Use Map. Look at all the colors representing the density, the different densities. Different density residential, commercial, and institutional zoning, along with easy access to public transit and bike lanes. That makes East Central Community unique and desirable. It is a thriving, authentic, walkable, historic community that allows aging in place with the 10th East Senior Center. The type of community that I believe the city is striving for. We are already the most densely populated community outside of Central City. Please respect the planning of the community in the past and those of us in front of you today to maintain these historic residential properties in density zoning as designated in the Central Community Future Land Use Plan.
Thank you. Next card is Madison Lemansky.
And the next person after Madison will be Ann O'Connell.
Hi, everybody. My name is Madison Lemansky, and I live at 146 South Lincoln Street. I'm here today as a concerned resident, a neighbor of many here, to stand up against this area being rezoned for the profit and benefit of owners that, from my perspective, don't appear to care about the safety, cleanliness, and quality of life in my neighborhood. I've had the unique perspective of the goings-on at this property as I have a bird's eye view from my second floor apartment, which has a south-facing window. And as mentioned earlier, why high-quality property management is a separate issue from why we're here today. I'm disappointed to share that I, in fact, witnessed a drive-by shooting on February 1st, 2020 at 12:58 a.m. on Lincoln Street, fired directly towards 949 East, 2nd South. 1 week later, my husband found a McDonald's cup full of marijuana on our front lawn, and while it is unclear if this was a drug drop location or simply left behind by a person that was too intoxicated to notice, these are issues that happen on an ongoing basis. While we are unable to prove that these drugs were associated with these homes, the number of intoxicated individuals that are consistently hanging around the property led us to this assumption. On a recent occasion, I found a woman who appeared to be high on meth squatting in the corridor of my building when I left for work one morning. From what I've witnessed in the 6 years I've lived on Lincoln Street, quality of life and the good and safety of our neighborhood is not the priority of this property owner, as they have laid out in their presentation today. To reward the current owners with a huge profit and build out of apartment buildings would reward years of negligence that I have personally witnessed. Thank you.
Thank you. Please. Ann O'Connell, did you wish to speak, or is your card just simply in opposition? Okay. Duly noted.
Howard Bro. You want your comments read?
No, he spoke, I think.
No, he didn't speak yet. Yes.
Oh. I do not believe in rewarding slumlords after they have allowed properties to run down with no efforts to maintain them. Thank you for your comments. Next is Tom Dickman.
So my name's Tom Dickman.
Excuse me, Mr. Dickman, can you speak a little closer to the microphone? Thank you.
Sure. I have a couple simple comments here that these houses are currently occupied. There's well more than 20 people living there. And it's important to ask, where will these people go if this proposal is approved? Where will they go? These people are currently paying rents which are within their means barely. The new proposal calls for 1 affordable housing unit out of 16. This is an insult to the people currently living there. It's also an insult to a city which is looking to increase affordable housing units, not decrease them. We saw in the owner's presentation a very sad statement that there was not much green space. Well, let me ask, if the property owners were so committed to green space, what stopped them during their many years of ownership from putting in more green space? As we heard, there is a history of dilapidation, of non-follow-through. There's been non-compliance issues with city code, building code, and sanitation issues. City workers have come to meet with the property owners and have had no-shows by the property owners. This costs the city time and money. This has been the history of the ownership from these people. And to allow their development to be approved would basically be awarding moral negligence. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the next card is Kathy Scott. Do you wish to speak? Okay, I'll read your comments, which is, rezoning is not a good idea in the middle of the neighborhood that would be negatively impacted. Thank you. We have another card from Peg Alderman, who does not wish to speak but has submitted the following comments. I have submitted a previous written response in opposition. Thank you. Maha Barani, do you wish to speak? Okay. Comments are, don't run places down and then say they have to go, sell them, and let someone like me take care of the historic housing stock in a respectful way. Next card is Annie Lefebvre. Thank you.
And after that will be Christy Perusnik.
So my name is Annie Lefebvre. We do not believe that the proposed zoning is compatible with the neighboring properties. None of the neighboring properties are currently used as medium-density multifamily residentials. In fact, as stated in the petition, existing city approvals permit 9 apartment units on the 5 parcels. So these apartments are currently occupied by a number of people who would most likely qualify as cost-burdened households. They would not be able to afford those units. So while the applicant is willing to provide 1 affordable housing unit in the project, where are the occupants who are presently there going to live? Where are they going to go? We feel that there are so many issues that still need to be addressed that this rezoning is just not appropriate at this time.
Thank you. Christy, I'll let you say your last name.
Oh, she did a really good job. Hi, my name is Christy Perusnik, and I'm here to support the staff recommendation and oppose the rezoning on Second South. Most of my comments have already been made, so I'll just say that maintaining single-family housing in R2 zoning would support the character of the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Next comment is, or next card, Morgan Galbraith.
And after that is Keenan Wells.
My name is Morgan Galbraith. I live on McClellan by Molly. I think it's a shame that it's all about money. I live there with my daughter. I own the house. I own a building on 2nd South and in between 8th and 9th. My duplex looks nothing like any of these places. It's just not right. And they shouldn't be rewarded with millions of dollars for not doing what they should have done to begin with. I mean, you can gut them and make them look gorgeous. Most of us that own homes, we do that. That's all of our houses are like that. I just don't want it to go through. I don't think it should.
Thank you.
Hello,
Keenan,
my name is
Keenan, okay,
Keenan
thank you.
Wells, and I have lived next to the property they're proposing to redevelop for approximately 26 years. As I grew up there, as a kid, I was told not to go over there because of the danger, because its property owners regularly left building and materials, rusty screws, and that kind of thing. I went over there anyway. I've got the scars to prove it. It's an insult, but it's true. They are slumlords. As far as the green space, they don't water their own lawns or mow them on any regular basis. They don't care about green space. Also, they've made some kind of misleading statements that confuse me. I'm not even quite sure that while they may own a home there, I don't think they actually live in it. They've got the location of the Senior Citizen Center wrong. The nursing home is not around the corner. Someone who actually walked this neighborhood know this. So this is not a community resident really making these applications. This is someone else. I'm not sure who, but they don't seem to be neighbors to this area. They talk about using a more recent document from 2012 when the current document that all of us are referencing was published 2015. There was editing done. I think someone paid attention. I believe the city is able to do that. One thing people haven't mentioned is parking on Lincoln Street is already extraordinarily limited. Their parking proposed, again, they could build a giant big box like is on Elevate if you approve this, but their parking as proposed empties into Lincoln Street. It's already hard to back out of parking in there. It's going to become a congestion nightmare if you add that many new parking spaces. Their current parking is underutilized right now because most of these people don't own cars. The people who will move into these are going to be students who are going to be 2 to a pair or 3 to pair and will each own their own car. Not enough parking space, and I hardly oppose.
Thank you. Irina Zale Twaya? Sorry.
My name is Irina Zaletnaya, and I'm going to read from the State Historic Preservation Office files for all these 5 structures. The 4 houses on 200 South are contributing structures based on an intensive level survey. The house at 159 South Lincoln Street is considered not contributing due to exterior modifications, such as siding applied over the underlying brick structure and inappropriate replacement windows, but may still have important local historical significance. It is page 2 of the Historic Site Form. State Historic Preservation Office notes that the changes appear superficial and could be reversed with proper restoration and rehabilitation. 4 of the 5 houses are designated as contributing, and the one non-contributing house could likely to be restored. all of these structures are indeed historic. So I think that should be preserved.
Thank you. Melissa Hubble.
And after that will be Tim Funk.
I purchased my home.
Please state your name for the record.
Melissa Hubble. I purchased my home at 1058 East, 200 South, almost 40 years ago. I got it for practically nothing because it was in god-awful shape. The man who lived there before me was born in it and died in it at almost age 100, and he had been senile for 25 years. But I didn't have any money, so I bought it, and I've spent the past 40 years fixing that house up. When I had money, I paid people to help me. When I didn't, I learned to do it myself. And I've watched that neighborhood grow for almost 40 years now. Those houses that are in dispute here, while my house was going up and being fixed up, have been going to rack and ruin through negligent landlords who never did anything to fix them up. In the meantime, I've had great neighbors like Irina. So many of you probably walk past my house while I feed your dog biscuits. And we've got a great neighborhood full of good people. We don't need an apartment building. Parking is already horrendous. I can't put my garbage out on the streets without somebody hauling the full cans to the curb so that my garbage doesn't get picked up because kids park there. There are too many other buildings that don't have. Ivy House has 24 units and only 6 parking spots. The parking is abominable. It's a good neighborhood full of good people. I'd really, really like it to stay that way. And I don't trust people who have allowed this property to deteriorate for 30 years to do anything to keep it the fine and good neighborhood it is, full of good people living quiet lives to the best of our ability. We just don't need any more of this. So I'm completely and totally opposed.
Thank you.
After Tim will be Jen Colby.
Good evening. My name's Tim Funk. I work on housing for low-income people with Crossroads Urban Center. I've been in this neighborhood all my life. My family lived on 11th East and 5th South. I know it inside out. I lived there as a college student. I've lived there as a resident on First South. I know the neighborhood. But what I want to say tonight is that we're glad that your staff has recommended that you don't approve this project. The project, if approved, could mean that the loss of affordable housing, and we know the number is 30, but it could be as many as 50, or more residents. The Planning Commission doesn't have to look at this real human impact, but they should, and they should be required to do so. Crossroads supports affordable housing loss mitigation ordinance to do that. We are bringing that to the mayor in the near future. We have an appointment to do that. We're asking her to propose a mitigation ordinance requiring replacement of affordable units when those units are destroyed by new development. In relation to that, in addition, Crossroads wants and will get policy and procedures helping lower income residents find an affordable place to live when displaced by new development or renovation. We sent you a prepared statement. We say that this is unacceptable. And we think it's unacceptable that you, as the first seers of this information, don't take a position on helping the people who are there. There are hundreds of properties in the city that have already had the people put out, that are vacant, that are waiting for the opportunity to develop them, and that can't happen anymore. You have to take the responsibility, as we do, to make displacement stop and to make people whole before they're put out. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's Jen Colby. And after Jen Colby is Rich Wilcox.
My name's Jen Colby, and my husband and I have owned the house at 160 South Lincoln Street since 2002. I've already submitted detailed comments in writing. Tonight, I'd like to emphasize the following. First, the applicants have claimed that citywide plans, including the housing plan, support their rezoning request from low to medium density on these 5 R2 lots. In fact, the emphasis of specifically the housing plan is to preserve and enhance affordable housing and to promote and enhance fair and equitable housing. This application is contrary to both those goals and is not supported. Housing Plan Goal 2 reads, increase housing opportunities and stability for cost-burdened households. Objective 5 reads, work with landlords to improve their housing stock and rent to very low-income households. According to the plan dashboard, the city has made very little progress on getting landlords to improve their substandard rental units, unfortunately. This is certainly true here. As noted, though, the poor track record of property management is a separate issue from this. This is a zoning issue. Also, city plans are tiered, and the local community master plan is the guiding document. The general statements are just that. Regarding affordability, the applicant has told us the target rental rate averages $2,200 a month to pencil. According to online calculators, this requires a gross annual household income of $82,000. For the same housing cost, a home buyer could afford a mortgage, taxes, and insurance on a $325,000 home. Meanwhile, truly affordable units and homes for purchase in our city remain out of reach for most Utahns. When we bought our house in this historic neighborhood, we didn't realize how many single-family houses were sitting on RMF-zoned lots due to previous urban renewals. A lot of those structures pointed to as compatible are some of the worst examples of our urban renewal from the 60s and 70s. We have seen how this affects the ability of individuals to compete with developers for properties up for sale. This is currently the case with a house and lot directly to our west. Upzoning drives up prices, threatens the viability of our homes and our neighborhoods. At this point, we could probably not buy back into our neighborhood. The first rule of holes is stop digging. Please vote to give a negative recommendation to this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, Rich Wilcox has submitted a card in opposition. We'll hear from Arthur Sanyade. I may have butchered that. My apologies.
The name's Sandak.
Sandak.
Right.
All right, sorry about that.
And next will be John Hunt.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to appear before you. I have submitted public comments on February 5, and it was such a rush to get them in last Wednesday. I felt I needed to make some revisions and corrections, which I submitted last Friday. I hope you've had a chance to review that. There's no way in my 2 minutes I'm going to be able to really bear it out. Many of the points that I've made that I think are valid. I strongly oppose this petition. For basically, the summary of argument indicates that that's because the community is largely against that, as you can see by the public turnout here. Our voice counts in protecting our neighborhood, or it should count, and I hope you're sensitive to that. I'm sure you are. Secondly, the petition is not supported to and contrary to the master plan. I think that this goes primarily to the overall land use goals in the master plan that promote low-density housing in our neighborhood. Their housing is marked as yellow on the future housing plan as well, R2. Thirdly, the petition is not supported by the Central City Community Historical District goals. Fourth, the petitioner owner is a bad neighbor. I am reticent to say they're slumlords, but they are. I wouldn't want to be called one, but there's no question about it. They've been a problem to me. I've lived in my home since 1979, and I've made considerable investments in my home. I'm very proud of my home. It's a beautiful home. It was built in 1905, and these people, I just live 3 doors down basically from that property. And across the street directly next to my house is a beautiful Victorian house that my neighbor's gone to great expense to build up. It's a real gem, and as I've indicated, this neighborhood is a good, unique neighborhood. It's time to roll back the clock and protect it with more low-density housing, which is the
Thank
overall
you.
goal of the master plan.
Great,
And I'm
thank
sure-
you for your comments.
Was that it?
That was it. We did get your letter. That was in our packet. Thank you.
Okay. I'm sorry, what'd you say about rebuttal?
No.
She said we
got
received your letter.
We got your letter in our
My
packet.
letter?
Yes, thank you. The next card is John Hunt. Okay. This card's in opposition. This will destroy the fabric of the neighborhood. Also, let's keep our historic past. Thank you.
Cindy Cromer's next. And after Cindy is Zachary Salt.
Madam Chair, Cindy has some handouts for everyone. I'm going to
Okay.
pass them down.
Thank you.
I'll just ad lib while those are coming down. My name is Cindy Cromer, and as some of you know, I rehab buildings like this. And I want you to know I've never been told by the city, as I provided new plumbing, new electrical, that I needed to provide a seismic upgrade. Ever. I have an active permit now. So, my active involvement in land use planning in this neighborhood goes back almost 40 years. I want to share with you 3 points from those 40 years. First of all, owner's control of multiple contiguous properties is not a consideration. You haven't heard about that tonight. There's a tremendous amount of land banking in this neighborhood. It's very common. I own adjacent properties on the blocks immediately to the south and to the west. The issue is not about ownership, but about master plan and zoning. The central community has precipitated more neighborhood plans and small area plans than any other part of the city. I have worked on all of them starting in the early 1980s when I was 30-something. This shift for this neighborhood all began with the East Central Neighborhood Plan adopted in December of 1984. And all of the master planning that's been done since then has been largely consistent with that 1984 shift. I can, of course, go into great detail. I've listed all of the plans that I consider relevant to this particular proposal. You can see that there's not one, there are a lot of them. And this is because there are so many of them and because they are so consistent. It's not just one of the things that you should consider tonight. It's bigger than that because there's so many plans and they've been so consistent for so long. Third point, in addition to the volume and the consistency of the master plan, the decisions of previous planning commissions and city councils in this neighborhood should inform your own deliberations. It is really remarkable, given how much time I've spent protesting things, that so many of these decisions have turned out well and consistent with the staff report. Thank you.
Thank you. Zach DeSalt.
After which is Ann Beck.
Hi, Zachary Dussault. I think I'm the only one in this room who supports this proposal besides the developer themselves. I just want to address the staff report and their negative recommendation because I believe they were handcuffed by the Central Community Planning Guidelines. I want to drill in on 2 specific points. In the Central Community Planning land use goals, it states that plans should ensure preservation of low-density residential neighborhoods, and at the same time, encourage the creation and maintenance of a variety of housing options and opportunities that meet the social needs and income levels of a diverse population. Single-family homes are not going to do that in Salt Lake. We have a growing population. Density is coming, whether you like it or not, and I think this is an excellent location for that density. The proposed site is 2 blocks from tracks rail. There's 2 high-frequency bus lines within a block of this site, and Second South is probably one of the best bikeable streets in the city, and it's only a 10-minute bike commute from this site to downtown Salt Lake. If density is going somewhere, I believe this is a great place to put it. You're halfway between downtown Salt Lake, you're halfway between the U, and if this is redeveloped under the current zoning, we're going to lose units. If it's developed under this new zoning, we're going to gain units. And I think that should be the overall goal of the planning policies of the city. Thanks.
Thank you. Ann Beck, do you wish to speak?
Brad Beck? Not here.
Okay. Noted in opposition for both.
James Wells?
Okay. Oh, yes, I will read the comments. The change in zoning increases the value of the property, thereby rewarding the property owner. So the city is rewarding the existing property owner. Why would the city reward, quote, slumlord, unquote? I have lived in the immediate area since 1990. I have never observed Pick Hoy owner hiring a licensed contractor. He has always done the minimal, typically by the tenants or PC's brother. Why reward neglect? Thank you for your comments. Okay. All of these are sort of unsure. This is the one that said, are these for this? Yep. That's 643. Oh, okay. And then we're back with Paul Toyne and DeGina Toyne. Did you wish to speak? Or just submitting your cards in opposition? He's gone? Okay. Both are in opposition. Brent Barnett, sorry. Do you wish to speak on this item? There's no case number listed.
Hi, thanks for listening to our comments. My name is Brent Barnett, and I know you've heard a lot. I would just like to make sure the following items are included on the record for today. Number one, preservation experts can attest that no modern construction can ever replicate the quality and appearance of historic construction. Number two, the properties in question have been designated by the National Register as architectural contributors to the historic district. It is important to recognize that any construction that might replace them will have absolutely zero historic quality and will thus be a detriment to the historic district and the property values in the neighborhood. I have a map here of the historic district I'd like entered. I know you have that, but I would like that in the record. Thirdly, in asking for a zoning change, the owners are asking for special treatment, as if they shouldn't have to play by the same rules that everybody else plays by. Finally, my fourth comment, it is important that the neighborhood retain its historic character. It should go on the record for the public's knowledge that government incentives allow homes contributing to the character of this neighborhood a full refund of 40% of construction cost. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. I have a card from Melinda Main.
Hi, my name's Melinda Main, and I've lived in the neighborhood for going on 40 years as well. I do live on 2nd South, just below 9th East. The one thing that has not been addressed here, I think, is back in the early 90s or late 80s, traffic calming islands were placed above 9th East on 2nd South, and that Lincoln Street and 2nd South, that would just be way too much congestion for those streets. That's my opinion on that. And as a real estate agent in the area, I've sold and helped many people buy and sell their homes. And I'll tell you, there's a lot of gentrification going on with those older homes. And people love the character. They come in, they look at the homes, they say, oh my gosh, it's a lot of work. But eventually they find a way to figure out how to make that a livable home. And there are people out there that want that. I do understand that our whole valley is going to be increasing in density over the next many decades. And I don't, to take away the character of what we have in the neighborhood behooves me, because it's the homeowners that take pride in their surroundings. And every time new renters come in, it's a new learning curve and a new teaching challenge to get them to get their garbage cans off the road, out of the street. There's a pride in ownership. We do know there's more congestion with parking because U of U students come and park in the neighborhood and then catch the buses up to the U. That's very obvious. And the other thing that concerns me too is that the city is increasing density, but they're not providing more green space. We need micro mini parks in all of these areas, and so that's my input. And we need more condos, not rentals. Thank you.
Thank you. Scott Andrews?
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I own a corner
Please
block.
state your name for the record.
Scott Andrews.
And speak a little closer to the microphone, please.
Scott
Thank
Andrews.
You. Thank you.
I own a corner block on 9th East and 2nd South, and I live up on University. And I actually went to, by happenstance, the community meeting when they were making the proposal to the community. And it was a very difficult process for the owners of the property on behalf of their parents to just get the presentation complete. And so I listened to the arguments that were put forth on the side, many unfounded, and then I did a little research, went around the block over the last month, and I found that block largely, I used to live on Lincoln Street at the Lincoln Apartments actually when Mark Hacking was the landlord. And it's become a mixed-use block with commercial and residential. And in fact, it's shifting more towards commercial because of the commercial buildings coming along. And I actually think that their plan to increase residential housing actually will stabilize a balance of mixed use for that block. And historically, as much as I did love China Blue, I think that China Blue was one of the 3 buildings that was a college hangout. And it's been pretty crazy there in the past and stuff. And it was, offered low rent housing to many people, very transitory housing. It was quite famous. Anyway, it will improve and stabilize the neighborhood and increase values for everybody. And this is the process of the master plan of higher density, and they have a large open area lot that's not being used to its full potential. And my understanding is that they've worked extensively with the City Planning Commission, trying to come up with different ways, and the determination was that the buildings couldn't be saved to increase the use of them as multifamily buildings.
Okay.
And
thank you. Thank you for your time.
so I support their application. I
Okay.
think it would be a contribution to the neighborhood.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak? We're through our stack of cards. Okay, please come forward and state your name for the record into the microphone. Are you speaking together or are you independent?
We are. Kevin and Carla Jensen.
Okay.
So we're landlords in the area, and we support it. We think it would have some distinct advantages, and I think the look of what they're showing us this evening, I think it would look really, really wonderful in there.
We own quite a few properties in the area, but specifically we own 2 properties on Lincoln Street. 153 Lincoln, and also 145. And to the east of us is a large, like a clinic office building. Directly to, then there's a big parking lot to the north, and then there's an apartment. I believe the gentleman who just spoke lived there. That's the one he was referring to. And then directly west, there's also another apartment. And our feeling is that we have seen a lot of, I'm just going to call it riffraff, and activity going on, drug activity, behind our property where the entrance is to a parking garage. And we feel that by doing something like this, that will eradicate a lot of that activity there, because this will get rid of a lot of the problem and a lot of the activity that goes on there. And we have been driving past lately, and we've seen a lot of just junk in that parking area, and I don't know what it is, but it's just not, it's quite despicable.
It's kind of a dumping ground right now.
And we understand that it sounds like there's a lot of animosity towards the landlords, the owners of the properties in question, but it sounds like they're now trying to remedy the problem. And I think just because they might make some money off of it is just ridiculous, because who really resents someone making money? If they can make this out of that block there, I say more power to them. And I think it'll make the property values a lot nicer. And so that's our opinion.
And increase the tax base for the city.
Okay,
So we're in support.
thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else here who would wish to speak, who's not have, okay, please come forward, state your name into the microphone, you'll have 2 minutes.
Hello, my name is Corinne Cummings. I used to live on Iowa Street in the early 1980s. Then I left and moved to Los Angeles for 21 years. There's a lot of this in Los Angeles. And there are a lot of homeless people in Los Angeles. This is not the solution in Salt Lake City. One of the things about Salt Lake City that I missed was the beauty of these neighborhoods. I don't own property here. I would like to, but I can't. When I see stuff like this, I see Los Angeles with numerous people like myself who worked in a university and could not afford to pay to live there. That's why I left. This, to me, does not look like a solution. I've listened to these homeowners talk about keeping up their homes and dedicating themselves to a good process of life and living well, and living with integrity, and living with purpose. When I hear about beautiful homes that have been neglected so that they can be torn down and have something like this, which to me has no character, has high expense attached to it, and displacement, I have to say that I wish I had had the opportunity sooner to register my, what is it called? Because I don't have your cards. I am opposed to the rezoning. It is not a solution. It's not a solution for Salt Lake, and it is not a solution for human beings. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here who would wish to speak? Oh, thank you. Okay. Anywhere, and just state your name for the record into the microphone.
My name is Angela Jensen, and not all of the tenants there are riffraff. The house specifically at 959 East, 200 South. Yes, it did have, formerly known as China Blue, lovingly called The Blue now. It did have college students and people in and out constantly. However, it was then rented to a family, and that family then broke up, but it saved their child from becoming an addict. Since then, it has then again become a house full of love,
It's okay.
full of art, and a community. And I love the people that are in that house. It's bring us all together, brought us all together. And it saved my life. Because before I met those people, I was in the darkest of hours. The tenants are afraid to come forward. They are afraid to speak, to show their faces. And they were not told that they would be evicted, but they were told that if they didn't get involved, they may stay as long as the houses stand. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this agenda item? Okay. Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing. Thank you all for your input and your comments. And I'll bring it back up to the commission for discussion. Do we want to bring Kelsey back? I've closed. I will open the public hearing for the last comment. You will have 2 minutes. Please state your name for the record.
My name is Wayne Sanford. I was born and raised in Los Angeles. I saw it grow over the years. I'm 70 years old and I spent most of it in LA. I watched city council after city council obeyed to the whim of the money. I saw Venice, Santa Monica destroyed, everything there, and turned into a sterilized city. I saw people moved out of there and moved into the streets on the Bunker Hill project. I don't want to see that happen here. You have a problem, but if you work with people, you can solve that problem. And that problem is housing. Government housing that has been abandoned can be used for the city. And that's all I've got to say.
Thank you. Okay. I will now close the public hearing again and bring it back up to the commission. Do we want to bring Kelsey back? Commissioners? Yes.
So Kelsey, I want to start off the questions.
Yeah.
So the most recent adoption of the East Central Master Plan was in 2005. Was that a broad adoption of like looking at the entire plan, as we don't tend to do? We tend to pick certain parts. We don't tend to do an overhaul of the entire master plan. At least we haven't in my community. So I'm just wondering what the scope of that revision for that 2005 master plan update was, if you know.
Yeah, so the 2005 Central Community Master Plan was a full overhaul of that area. It addressed the future land use map, as well as housing policies, neighborhood policies, and it broke it down into the separate distinct neighborhoods.
So I'm wondering, when you do a future land use map in those updates, particularly this zone, or this, we'll just look at this block, why the future land use map continues to show RMF 35 for the current parcels that are RMF 35. Is that then the vision for those parcels as well? Like if you're going to do an overhaul of your master plan and you want to maintain low density, why would you continue to allow those existing RMF 35 zones to exist and to remain that way in the future land use plan if your real goal is to maintain low density?
That's a fair question. From what I understand, in 2005, when planning staff and the community mapped the future land use map, a lot of it was to reflect what was on the ground. So the subject properties were mapped R2, low density. They reflected single-family detached structures that had been converted into multifamily. Some of the neighborhood, they were actually quite intentional on taking the commercial uses and mapping those as residential uses for hope of a turnover of those non-conforming uses. So that's, you see some of that designation of the RMF zones on top of non-conforming commercial structures in that neighborhood as a hope that they will turn over to residential.
I guess that's what I would assume would have happened for any of these areas. Because if a future land use map, it is a reflection of your vision and your hope, but if that's not been addressed or changed in that massive overhaul, and I will tell you, I know a massive overhaul of the master plan takes years, so it's not a quick thing. I guess I'm disappointed in that I don't know how much stock to put in that vision if there is no hope for this block to be low density, if we haven't addressed those RMF 35 zones that are abutting it and breaking up this block. I mean, they basically dissect this block in terms of the R2 zoning. So that's just not really a question, I guess, for you. And I also just wanted on the record that, you know, we're looking at what is compatible for this area, that the Planning Commission has no role in demolitions, and we have no role in evaluating the history of the management of this property in our decision. I just kind of want that's not something that we can even legally consider in our decision. Yeah, I'd like you to just, because some of the comments from the public that I wrote down that I felt were important. The other two, well, the other one I really want you to just give me your thoughts on is the components of the housing plan, because I feel like maybe there's some conflicting things happening, or because we can cherry pick out the parts that speak to our position more. So when we look at the housing plan, how are you prioritizing, and maybe the housing plan does this, but prioritizing the goal of getting more housing versus preserving affordable housing? And how is the housing plan treating that particular question?
So if you actually look at page 59 of your staff report, the only applicable objective in the housing plan that staff found applies to this proposal was objective number 1. The remaining portion of the 5-year housing plan addresses affordability and city policies and how to fund those affordability and the city policies. It wasn't necessarily tied to this application. I evaluated objective 1, which was to review and modify land use and zoning regulations to reflect the affordability and the needs of a growing and pioneering city. It was a difficult analysis because I do understand the sentiment of needing additional housing, what's existing on the ground, and balancing the city needs. So. Oh, and let me just touch on the demolition of historic structures. That was raised quite a few times, and there is a distinct difference between a national and a local historic district. This is in a national historic district where it is with the National Park Service, and it is incentive-based. So essentially it is, if you invest in your property, you are eligible for tax credits. However, the city does not impose any sort of regulations on preservation of national historic districts or National Register properties. It's only local historic districts that we regulate.
And was there, when the local survey was done, when it looked at this area, this block, these properties, was there a reason why they were not included in the local district? Do we know?
You know, there was some discussion and some comments that I received from the community that there was an intent to increase the university district further west, like expand that local district to pick up, I think, to 9th East. However, there was never, I don't believe there was an application or momentum for that application, and I haven't heard anything to start that again. Local historic districts can be quite cumbersome.
Right. Okay. Any other questions for Kelsey?
And just for verification, by right, they could build how many units?
So if they wanted to work within our non-conforming use section of our ordinance, we would re-permit the 9 units.
The 9.
However, if they wanted to wipe everything on the 5 properties, they could have 7.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for Kelsey? Does anyone have any follow-up questions for the applicant? Any discussion among commissioners?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you.
I really feel a need for more housing stock and units and to help grow in the city, but at the same time, I have not heard an argument why this zone would be more appropriately zoned RMF 35. And so I'm consistent with the staff and their recommendations. So let's see, where am I looking at? So based on the findings and analysis in the staff report, the testimony and discussion in the public hearing, with the Planning Commission recommended the City Council deny the proposed zoning and master plan amendment PLN PCM 2019-683 and PLM PCM 2019-684 for the properties listed in the staff report. The proposed zoning amendment from R2 district to RMF 35 district, and requested the master plan amendments from low density residential to medium density residential.
Okay. We have
I'll second that.
Motion by Matt, a second by Sarah. Let's start with Maureen.
Yes.
Carolyn.
Agree.
John.
Yes.
Brenda.
Yes.
Amy.
Yes.
Matt.
Yes.
Sarah.
Yes.
Andreas.
Yay.
Okay. The motion passes to forward a negative recommendation to the City Council. Again, the City Council makes the final decision on zoning map amendment petitions. They will also hold a public hearing before making the final decision. So thank you all for coming. Thank you for participating. We appreciate your time and your comments. And stay tuned. Okay. Recess? You want to take a recess now? We're going to take a 5-minute recess, and then we will reconvene.
Take a picture of that? Yeah.
Beat the crowd.
The PEG development, revive word. to go ahead and restart. Commissioners.
Okay.
Commissioners. Whack them on the head. Yeah. Okay. Next item on the agenda is the revival design review at approximately 355 South, 200 West, which is case number PLN PCM 2019-00640.
Okay.
Kelsey.
Sorry,
Long
it's
time
me
no
again.
see.
Okay, so this is a design review request for additional height in the D3, which is the downtown warehouse residential district. Buildings taller than 75 feet but less than 90 feet are required to go through the design review process. The applicant is requesting 89 feet 10 inches through the site average. Staff is recommending approval with conditions as outlined in your staff report and the motion sheet. So the proposal is located at approximately 355 South, 200 West within the National Register Warehouse District. The block is currently typified by vacant lots and surface parking. 2 existing buildings will be demolished to accommodate the proposal, and the building will approximately occupy an area that is currently 80% surface parking. 2 driveways will be removed on 200 West, which will increase the pedestrian orientation and will improve the functionality of the protected bike lanes. This is the proposal summary. It's 89 feet 10 inches as mentioned. There are no provided setbacks. The number of units they are providing are 142 within the 5 stories. The parking is within a 2.5-story garage and will total 194 on-site stalls. The ground floor activity is approximately 900 square feet of retail space, includes a mailroom, entry lobby, and leasing office. The exterior materials include glass, brick, concrete masonry, block, cast-in-place concrete, metal, porcelain tile, fiber cement board, wire mesh, vinyl windows, and stucco. This is under the design review and the D3 standards. Planning staff suggested revisions to the design of the ground floor of 200 West facing elevation to comply with the purpose statements and the goals of the D3 zoning district, as well as the design review standards. In response, as you'll see in the illustrations, the applicant included a new retail space along 200 West, additional ground floor activation, and a much larger and more pedestrian-friendly mid-block walkway. In addition, the applicant proposed public art both on the northwest portion of the 200 West facade and along the mid-block walkway. The first consideration for discussion is the additional height. The request supports the goals and purpose of the downtown community plan by adding residents to downtown and improving amenities in the Broadway district by adding a mid-block walkway. The building has greater than 50% residential use and complies with the design review standards. The second consideration is the mid-block walkway. This walkway has improved considerably through applicant revisions. It initially began as a 32-inch sidewalk within the parking garage that terminated at the garbage collection area. In its current iteration, it is located on the north side of the parking garage's exterior wall and will connect 200 West to the Fairfield Inn and eventually through the block to West Temple. The applicant has entered into an agreement with the owners of the Broadway Lofts to use a portion of their property for the mid-block walkway and will place a public easement on the walkway. The mid-block walkway has constraints in this location created by the ramp to Broadway Lofts parking, which rises 8 feet on the north of the walkway and 30-foot wall of the Revival's parking garage to the south. Given the scale and massing of both, it would be preferable to have a 20-foot mid-block walkway. The public art panels, this rendering shows the proposed mid-block walkways with the panels for public art located approximately 20 feet from the entrance to the walkway. This elevation of the north facade demonstrates, the precise location, spacing, number, material, and dimensions of the panels have not been detailed. That is one of the conditions listed for staff's recommendation. The existing development pattern along 200 West is typified by surface parking, vacant lots, so making the evaluation of the request for additional height was somewhat difficult as there is little context for comparison. The existing Simply Sushi building to the south of the parcel is approximately 20 feet tall and located in the D1 zone. The parcel is currently prevented from developing to its full by right of 100 to 375 feet because of the presence of a billboard, which is located to the east, but that may change in the future as the block continues to redevelop. Okay, so the public process and then the standards of review were the design review, which was discussed in the staff report. And planning staff is recommending approval with the conditions for a public easement for the mid-block walkway, doors on 200 West to be spaced to emphasize pedestrian orientation, and then the final approval of the details for public art panels, signage, site lighting, street furniture, paving patterns, and landscaping to be delegated to planning staff. I can answer any questions at this time.
Thank you. Any questions for Kelsey at this time? None? Okay. Is the applicant here?
Mm-hmm.
Hello, my name is Matt Crambuel. I'm representing PEG Development. I just want to thank you for your time tonight. We wanted to thank Kelsey for her presentation, and especially want to thank Laura Bandara for helping us through this design review and refining this project to meet the goals of Salt Lake City. We're excited to do another project here in downtown Salt Lake, and I'd like to turn the time over to Brian Meekum with FFKR Architects, who will provide you a little bit more context of our project.
So here you can see another rendering of the project. As we considered its location in the warehouse, we really wanted to embrace that warehouse idea. As in 2016, the area was increased to include a lot of the warehouses in the area, including some of the precedent images of the flour mill, the Big D building, and particularly the central building as warehouse inspiration. This is the existing Nickerson Pump and Machinery Company building, which is on site. As you can see, this is the view from 400 south. Again, here is 200 west, that view of the parking and worn out building of the glass repair. So this is the difference of where that is located on the property. So there is, as it was mentioned, this is actually two zoning districts. The south portion is D1 with a building height of 100 feet, which encompasses the area south of the tall glass tower. And then the northern portion of the building is within the D3 zone, and as it's the primary design standard for the block. Part of the site constraints is agreements with multiple adjacent properties. So the first is the agreement with the Vectra property to the south, where Simply Sushi is located, where there is a parking easement to provide parking for that parcel due to its size. The second is for the Fairfield Inn that is to the east. There is an existing fire lane requirement that goes from 200 west through this property around the Fairfield and reconnects to 400 south. That also needs to be maintained. And so there are fire-related height requirements for that access, which kind of influences the height and floor levels of the building. The next component is working with Broadway Lofts, as there is an agreement for trash access and loading for their tenants in that property. So here is highlighting the area of the mid-block walkway and the requirements of that. And then the activation of the first floor with mixed-use functions off of the sidewalk for that activation of the property. So you can see that there is a lot of design constraints that we're trying to manage on this first floor. So it takes up a lot of usable space on the first floor, pushing the building more vertically. So this is some of that pedestrian experience where we're trying to highlight what's occurring on the first floor with accent bands or architecture or art displays, trying to make this much more walkable, pedestrian-friendly experience. So as it comes to the building, the podium parking structures relates to the size and scale of the pedestrian and to the adjacent buildings. The apartment tower portion then steps back as it rises up with predominantly brick architecture and detailing. And then there's a creation of a top to the massing of the building, kind of reducing the visual height of it with the penthouse. So trying to balance that traditional warehouse detailing with a little bit more architecture and a bunch of entrance and wayfinding. The amenity spaces and public area of the leasing office and tower is highlighted with a little more modern glass entrance. The building itself is U-shape in form, creating a secure private area on the third floor amenity deck where there's a lot of concept for oasis for the residents, being able to have a high level of landscaping on that amenity deck, festoon lighting, grills, fireplace, spa, to add to the amenities of the facility with fitness, yoga, business centers, media areas, dog and bike wash, to really be able to provide amenities here. Part of what we've learned with the housing is even though this is in an urban city environment, these residents still want to have parking places to be able to access all the other amenities that the state has to offer. And so they may be walking during the week, during the business day, but during the weekends, they want to have that flexibility of that vehicle ready to hit the amenities of the state. So part of this is to reclaim and salvage some of the existing historic building components, doors, brickwork, and reinstall them inside the building as art details to try to give a sense of place. Some of those components have been there for a number of years, decades, to give a sense of what this building is and where it came from and why it's there. Part of the reason why the name is reviving that component and giving a sense of place. And we feel that this is providing that response to the D3 design standards.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant?
Is there I can't find it. Is there a visual of what it looks like from 400 South?
No, I don't. I have not provided that. That elevation, I believe, is in the packet.
It is in the packet. That's where I can't find it. Okay, I'll keep looking.
Okay. There should be an elevation of it. There's not a camera perspective of it.
Any other questions for the applicant? Or Kelsey, do you have the?
So low. I don't have the page number, but it's within attachment B, the plan set, and about halfway through, you'll see the south elevation.
If I may, it's page 38. Sorry, it was taking me a while for it to load pages.
It's like just...
The south elevation begins on page 38 of your staff report. And there's a couple iterations of that. The second iteration on page 39 shows some of the materials rendered into that drawing.
Any other questions for the applicant at this time? None? Okay. Thank you. Okay, we will open the public hearing. Is there anyone here from the Community Council who wishes to speak? Okay. We have 2 cards, and I understand the speakers want to combine their time. Kurt Lund and Vladimir Acosta, is that correct? Yes. Okay.
Sorry, I don't have PowerPoint for you guys, but this is the front of our building.
You can just hand those to
Yeah,
the commissioners and then
sit down and
Hand them
state
right
your
here.
name for the record.
And they can pass them around while you're speaking.
Hello, my name's Kurt Lund. I own and operate Simply Sushi. When I moved to Salt Lake City, 400 South, where we are located, was an empty shell. I designed and built my restaurant and have dealt with all the hurdles of owning and operating and building a business. I was the first tenant here and now have been here for over 11 years, a quarter of my life, every day. I have 40 people that work for me and depend on me for a paycheck and for a job. And their families depend on me too. Running a restaurant is a tough business. We have survived because we offer the best product we possibly can at a reasonable price. No one is more affected by this project than myself or Vladimir, who owns Ibiza Club, which is part of our building. I'm very frustrated by how I even learned about this proposed project. I learned of it from a city flyer on October 15th. It said, notification of project to your neighborhood. Then a few days later, I came to work and Pate Construction was having a meeting in our parking lot. I still had no idea of the magnitude of this project. This is where I approached and met a Matt Cramble, who just was speaking, and scheduled a meeting with him that I had to invite my own property managers, Vectra Management, to. They had not yet mentioned or informed me of this project. At the meeting in the following week, my property managers told me they knew nothing of the project until recently. Here's my question. How do you manage a property and not know of an 8, 9, or 10-story proposed building that is going up in its parking lot? There's not 2 buildings that are going to be demolished. There's 3 on the property. At this meeting, I learned of the proposed building is going smack dab in the middle of my parking lot, and that was the pictures I showed you. The property line has to be moved, and their building is going to be in the middle of the parking lot, and we would lose all of our parking in front of our building. Matt informed me of the following that would take place. The parking spaces would be removed on my side of the building. They would move the entire driveway right up to our sidewalk. The new driveway would pave over top of my existing grease trap that I've spent $50,000 on installing when I opened. The power transformer, which is in the pictures, would be relocated and interrupting our building's power for a period of time. They were planning to break ground this spring. That was my meeting with him, like a bomb dropped. I question, how can a property be totally redesigned and an actual property line get moved on a property that I have now leased for over 11 years without even consulting me or saying hello? Next is the biggest issue, parking. I was informed that because of the new driveway, we would now have no parking directly in front of our restaurant at all. Because that is where the driveway would be, that we wouldn't lose any parking, actually gain some parking, but it would now be underneath their proposed building, somewhere in the back at an undetermined time. That there would be another building being built on our property for retail, and we would also share parking with them too and the other tenants that are going underneath this proposed building. My questions are, where do we park during construction? We currently have parking for 60. By my estimate, during construction, I would have none on my side because the new road eliminates my parking in front of the building, and you're not going to be parking underneath a building that is being built. This would leave us with a handful of spaces in front of Ibiza, the adjoining nightclub. Mind you, 4 of our current spaces are handicap. With the proposed new driveway, where do my handicap customers park? Where do people pull up to pick up takeout, which is the largest growing part of a restaurant industry currently? We do have delivery vehicles. Semi-truck-sized vehicles make deliveries there daily. How does that work with the new ingress and egress? The grade change with the new drive, they would prohibit this. Where do my employees, where do my customers, where does everybody park during construction phase?
I'm going to ask you to wrap it up.
Right here. Pig and Vectra have only thought about how to maximize square footage. They have not thought about any of these issues and how they will impact their current tenants. We have not had any follow-up meetings or communication to address any of my concerns. I've recently re-signed my lease just prior to learning of this project after 3 months of negotiating. This project was never brought up to me, even though I have expressed the only reason we are at this location is for parking many, many times. If I had known about this building, I wouldn't have re-signed my lease. I believe that this project will put me out of business specifically because of the decreased revenue for being in construction zone for 2 or more years and lack of parking during the building phase.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Is there anyone else here who'd like to speak? Zach?
Zachary Dussault. You guys probably already know me by now. I'm here to speak in support of the height variance. My only concern with this is the number of parking spots being provided here. I believe it's too many. With the new parking ordinance that's working its way through the city council, if I'm correct, I believe the minimum parking would be 0 for this development. I understand the developer's concerns with residents who want to access amenities outside of downtown. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to store your car downtown. This parking garage is more space where housing could be provided in probably the most walkable neighborhood in our city and the most bikeable neighborhood in our city, with Broadway being the bike boulevard that it is. Also, its proximity to transit. But I do appreciate that it's replacing surface parking because people can't live in parking spaces. And in regards to the gentleman who fears for his business, I think having 42 units of people who like to go to dinner sometimes, maybe want some sushi right next door would be pretty good for business, but I don't run one, so. And that's it, thanks.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here who'd like to speak? Okay, seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Why don't we ask Kelsey and the applicants to come back? So the gentleman who spoke from Simply Sushi raised a number of issues, mainly with property lines, where you're building, how you're going to be impacting the adjacent property. Can you respond to some of his concerns?
Yes, we can. So he mentioned Vectra Management. They're the existing owners of the parcels that.
Just speak a little.
Yes, yeah. So the existing owners, Vectra Management of the Simply Sushi building, they are the existing property owner of the land in which will be developed. They have been an active participant in relocating or performing a lot line adjustment to modify the building. We will be providing approximately 48 parking spaces underneath our building for the Simply Sushi restaurant after construction is complete. We will be providing approximately 11 stalls on the site during construction, and Vectra Management has told me that they will provide additional stalls off-site for their tenants.
Okay. And then in terms of staging, do you have that planned out to minimize impact on the adjacent property, or are you still in the process of?
We're still in the process of refining that, but we have every intention of reducing the impact on the surrounding community.
Okay. Any other questions for Kelsey or the applicant? Talkative bunch tonight. Wow. Would anyone like to entertain a motion?
I'd actually like to ask some questions.
Okay.
So this is a design review, so I'd like to kind of jump in and do that. I'm all for density, for height. I think those things are really important in our downtown. You kind of mentioned that you were looking at warehouses, and I'm really concerned personally with how spot on you hit that. I feel like this looks like a self-storage building. I feel like the windows are really small for a residential project. almost prison-like with the way you did the mullions. Could you guys speak to that a little bit? Is there any hope for this to be an asset to the community versus feeling like another self-storage building in the neighborhood?
Yep. So a lot of the material design standards for the D3 warehouse district is predominantly hard surfaces like concrete, masonry block, or brick. And so we're trying to design within that standard. There's a ratio of what that can be accommodated by. And then the intent was with the gridded windows, was that something that you often see in a warehouse style window versus just having a blank pane of glass?
Mm-hmm.
So trying to embrace that in the lower section and then leave more of the modern glass at the penthouse level where there's that change of material, to be able to break up that level of facade.
Okay. Well, I guess I just feel it's unfortunate for a residential project. I see where you're headed with the design, but I think there's elements that you could have improved where instead of having a different color of brick, that could have actually been concrete if you really want to mimic that style. I think when you fake a style, it actually detracts from the neighborhood instead of adding to it. Like, again, I can see where you were headed, but I think you missed the mark on it, if I'm going to be honest with you. And I think our city could use another color other than beige. It seems like every development has beige on it. So I would suggest just kind of thinking through it a little bit before you guys start construction. But those would be my comments.
Thanks, John.
Anyone else?
So, Kelsey, I'm wondering, in the standards, there's really no direction for us to consider, or maybe I'm just missing it because we had to read a lot this week. What standards might be applied here to address the impacts to the neighboring buildings? Because it seems like the parking standards and that are all for this specific development as it exists, not in relationship to any adjacent properties. And I just wanted some clarification or direction on what we could be looking at to evaluate that.
That's a fair question. The design review standards are strictly the design review. The D3 for setbacks for impacts to adjacent properties would be what we would look at. And for the D3, there are no required yards, meaning you can build a property line in the zoning district. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but Molly, do you want to jump in?
I guess I'm just wondering.
Yeah, if I can jump in a little bit, Amy, because I worked with Laura on this application and the applicant as well as the design review standards. So in terms of there's the base design standards in the D3. The design review standards talk a lot about compatibility and where new development kind of meets existing development. Are there common lines that are carried across, with cornices or other design details? It talks about, but specifically it talks about the impact, because this is being reviewed for height, talks about the impact of that height on adjacent property, but more specifically public property. So you're more looking at impacts from shadow than from use, because we're talking more about the design of the building and the massing, materiality, how it's blocked, that kind of thing. Does that help? I mean, we also talk about like light trespass and things like that, but I don't know that that's a specific issue in this case.
Yeah, it helps. I'm really trying to construct the parameters of what we can consider in relationship to this particular site and what we're given. So that helps define that for me.
And the standards that Molly's referencing, start on page 25 and then 26 of the cornices, the details and the height.
Any other questions for Molly or the applicant? Any discussion? Anyone willing to make a motion? Or we can hang out.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you.
I would like to make a motion, Madam Chairman.
Okay.
Based on the analysis and findings listed in the staff report, information presented, and the input received during the public hearing, I move that the Planning Commission approve the design review request for additional height on PLN PCM 2019-00640 for the project located at approximately 355 South, 200 West. The recommendation is based on the conditions of the approval listed in the staff report, and final details regarding the conditions of approval are delegated to planning staff.
Okay, we have a motion by Brenda.
I'll second.
Second by Maureen. Any discussion? None. Okay. Andreas?
Yay.
Sarah?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Brenda?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Carolyn?
Agree.
Maureen?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you all very much. Okay, next item on the agenda is the street vacation at approximately 800 North and Warm Springs Road, case number PLN PCM 2019-00824. Okay.
Thank you. As you stated, this is a proposal to vacate a section of the street near 800 North and Warm Springs Road. The request is to vacate an approximately 1.3 acre area of the 800 North right-of-way that's adjacent to a former overpass from 800 West to Warm Springs Road. You can see on the aerial the proposed area to be vacated in blue, and then Warm Springs Road is shown to the east or to the right, and then I-15 is to the west. On the west side, you can see the Rose Park Neighborhood Center and the location where the overpass was previously located. And there's an earlier aerial on the staff report that shows the conditions when the overpass was still in its existence. In these two photos here, the photo on the left is facing east towards Warm Springs Road, and then the photo on the right is facing west towards I-15. As far as the proposal itself, there are several key considerations. The first is Utah State Code. It states that the city must have good cause for the vacation, and that no members of the public or persons will be materially injured by it. And staff finds that the proposed vacation would not be detrimental and would be in the public interest because the city would be compensated at the market rate for the property. As far as the second one, city master plans, the Capitol Hill Master Plan was completed before the reconstruction of I-15 in the early 2000s, and it does not discuss the overpass. The plan does discourage the expansion of industrial use in the neighborhood. However, you can see in the photo on this slide that the parcel has industrial land already to the north, east, and south, and then I-15 is located to the west. The proposal is also consistent with the city's 1990 urban design element in that there's a potential benefit with the sale of the right-of-way. And it's also consistent with Plan Salt Lake, since it would assist an employer and allow for the expansion of their property. As far as city ownership and use, the city ownership is limited to the 132 feet width. The sections kind of shown there in the whiter color are owned by UDOT or considered part of their right-of-way, and UDOT has expressed a willingness to sell the property to the applicant and has indicated to them that they do not have an interest in using the right-of-way. And then from the city side, the applicant is agreeable to a public utility easement in the vacated area, and then this would be put in place at the time of disposition. So the staff recommendation is that the proposed vacation is consistent with the adopted city policy on street closures and vacations, since it would not deny access to the areas, and the city would obtain a fair market value for the property. And the sale also provides a public benefit. So based on this information, planning staff recommends that the Planning Commission forward a positive recommendation to the City Council for the request, and that it also include the condition regarding a public utility easement. Are there questions?
Does anyone have questions for Sarah?
Yeah. Does the applicant intend to use this or buy it from the city?
Yes. The applicant intends to buy it from the city and expand the use of their property onto the site. And the applicant's here as well.
Is the applicant to the north or the south?
So the proposal would give the opportunity for the property owners to the north and the south to
split it?
each purchase the half, correct?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so the applicant is here. Does
Yes.
he wish to speak?
Nobody's available to answer questions.
Okay, any questions for the applicant? None. Okay. Then we will go to the public hearing. Is there anyone here from the Community Council who wishes to speak on this? Okay, seeing none. I do have one card here from Lynn Wall. Did you wish to speak, or just do you want me to read your? Okay, sure. Please come forward and state your name, and you'll have 2 minutes.
Yes, I'm the property owner to the south. It is our intention to jointly purchase it with the people to the north. It is also our intention to use the property right now. That 1.3 acres is an area where we get a lot of theft. Both north and south property owners get a lot of theft from our property. It's accessed. They cut holes in the chain link fence, and so again, by developing this, we're hoping to discourage that in the future. So again, support of it, and hope you guys agree. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here who would like to speak on this agenda item? Okay, seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Bring this back to the Planning Commission.
I'll make a motion, please.
Okay, thank you, Brenda.
Based on the information in the staff report, the information presented, and the input received during the public hearing, I move that the Planning Commission forward a positive recommendation to City Council for the request to vacate this section of 800 North right-of-way from I-15 to Warm Springs Road, subject to the following condition. The city shall record a public utility easement in the vacated area at the time of disposition.
Okay, motion by Brenda,
Second.
second by John. Any discussion? Okay, let's start with Maureen.
Yes.
Carolyn.
Agree.
John.
Yes.
Brenda.
Yes.
Yes.
Matt.
Yes.
Sarah. Yes. Andreas.
Yay.
Okay, motion passes. This will now go on to City Council for final approval. Thank you. Okay, next item. Conditional use for ADU at approximately 1083 South Blair, case number PLN PCM 2019-01051.
Thank you. As you stated, this is a request for a conditional use approval for an ADU. The proposed ADU would be located in the northern half of the rear yard of the single-family dwelling at 1083 South Blair. You can see the property is located on the east side of Blair, and then there's an alley to the rear. This shows the front of the house, and then on the left, and then on the right, you can see the front and the side. And the ADU would be located in the northern half of the side yard there that you see there on the right. These photos are of the rear yard where the ADU would be located, which would be towards the right, and then the parking would be located towards the bottom left. And then the photo on the right shows the alley. The fence is the existing fence that's on the subject property, and then the garage is on the neighboring property to the north. Here are renderings of the property. It would have a lofted area and then also have a patio. In this slide, you can see the top graphic would show the location and the height of the proposed ADU in context with the existing garage and house. And then on the bottom is a site plan. The ADU, again, is located on the northern half of the rear yard. The proposed parking would be to the south and would be accessed from the alley. As far as the footprint of the ADU, it's 459 square feet, just under 50% of the main structure. And then the lofted area brings the total size of the ADU up to 645 feet, just under the maximum. Here are elevations of the proposed ADU. The top left is the west. Next to that is the north. And then on the bottom, the south is on the left. And then the east is on the right. As far as public comment, the city held an open house and received 2 favorable comments from people who attended. Had a few phone calls. One was from a neighbor who had concerns about increased development in the area and the potential for crime, and another with concerns about tree removal. You can see here on the screen the staff recommendation is for approval with a single condition that the applicant comply with the registration process.
Sarah, can you repeat the telephone calls, the second one you received?
Concerns with the tree removal?
Okay.
Are there questions for staff?
Any other questions for Sarah?
Sarah, is there a parking place in the back of the lot? Is that for the ADU?
Correct. The ADU parking space is in the back of the lot, kind of shown on the
off
south.
the alley, right?
Correct.
Okay.
And then there's an existing garage and then a driveway on Blair.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Is the applicant here?
Yes.
So I know there were 9 cases, so I won't say very much. I'm the architect, and
Please just state your name.
Sorry, my name is David Brock.
Thank you.
The applicant was actually my colleague, Tom Candy, but he couldn't come tonight. We just tried to keep this very modest. We tried to balance privacy with development. We tried to create something very small. We tried to focus the openings onto the immediate yard itself and the patio to balance privacy. We only have 1 window on the north, and that's a high window in the stairwell. And then the windows on the south really focus on the immediate yard and patio. And the high windows kind of cant to the southeast to try to really connect it more to distant places and not the neighbor to the south. And I think the alley, these long rectangular lots with an alley are really conducive to kind of enlivening the alley and reducing crime, not increasing crime. And I think it really creates a good opportunity for a nice dwelling for somebody to access from the alley. So I could just take any questions if anybody has any.
Any questions for the applicant?
Yes, I noticed you have a rabbit cage in your plan.
Yes,
Is-
the primary occupants will be rabbits.
Okay, thank you very much. That's
so
what I thought.
We want to provide housing for rabbits as well. Very inclusive.
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay, seeing none. Thank you. Appreciate it. We'll now open the public hearing for this item. Is there anyone here from the community council? Okay. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak on this issue? Zach, come on up.
Zach Dussault, just going to keep it short. I'm in support of the project, more housing. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Okay, we'll now close the public hearing. Any discussion among commissioners, or is someone ready to make a motion?
I'm ready to make a motion.
Thank you.
Based on the information listed in the staff report, the information presented, and the input received during the public hearing, I move that the commission approve the request for conditional use for an accessory dwelling unit at 1083 South Blair Street as presented in the petition PLNP CM 2019-01051 with the conditions listed in the staff report.
Okay, motion by Sarah.
I'll second that.
Second by Carolyn. Any discussion? No. Andreas?
Yay.
Sarah?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Amy,
Yes.
Brenda,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Carolyn,
Agree.
Maureen.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you very much. Rabbit cages were not a condition of approval, just for the record. Okay. Next item, the conditional use for the Sacred Circle Group Recovery Home, case number PLN PCM 2019-01012. David.
Okay, good evening. As you noted, this is a conditional use, and this is for the Sacred Circle Group Home. It's for a medical detoxification recovery facility, which is classified as a dwelling group home, large group home, which is a conditional use in the D2 zoning district. So the proposed facility is located within an existing office building, and it'll take about 17,000 square feet of the building's first floor. It does have, the proposal is for 24-hour supervision, security, et cetera. It has its own separate entrance to the parking garage. It's kind of an oddly configured building. It has numerous parking garage entrances. This is the facade you see on 200 East. The entrance for the parking garage will actually be on 700 South, but it is a building with numerous garage entrances. And the facility will be on the first floor of the building, and will have its own entrance as well. Here's a picture of the 700 South facade of the building, and this would be the parking garage that would lead to the use. Key considerations in this proposal were the neighborhood compatibility and anticipated impacts and master plan compliance. To put it into, I'm backing up, to put it into some perspective, that office building is located at the corner of 700 South, 200 East. It's in a district in the city that has a lot of social and health services. The county health center is immediately to the north. The Geraldine King Women's Resource Center is directly to the west, and it's across the street from the Department of Workforce Service offices. So it does fit with the neighborhood character of the kind of services and uses that are occurring. They're all downtown support kind of functions. We also looked at master plan compliance, and again, the plan for this area, downtown plan, does recognize that this is kind of the outer edges of downtown where you have a lot of those support functions. Staff analyzed this, looking at the standards for conditional uses, found that it met those standards, and then the criteria for the detrimental effects determination. So we are recommending that the Planning Commission approve the proposed conditional use.
Thank you, David. Any questions for David at this time? Okay, is the applicant here? Oh, question for David.
Talk me through real quick, a group home, talk me through the concept, all it does, how many people, housing.
In our zoning ordinance, we define dwelling, group home, large, a residential treatment facility occupied by 7 or more individuals licensed by the state of Utah under Title 62, Chapter 2, and it talks about a 24-hour living environment for individuals unrelated to the owner, and deals with specialized treatment, whether that's behavioral modification, rehab, and then it goes on and lists a number of those things, including chemical dependency. So it's more of a state licensing issue, but we recognize that as a use in certain zones.
And did you kind of just think through the relationship between the Homeless Resource Center and, this, the recovery home and the group home here? Is that helpful? Is that good? Is that bad? Is there, do they coordinate services? Do they relate services at all? Yes or no?
I think the applicant would be able to better answer that, who their client base would be.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks, David. Yeah, if the applicant's here, please come forward. And please state your name for the record.
You bet. So my name is Josh Anderson. I'm the healthcare administrator over at Sacred Circle Healthcare, and this is
Matt Judd. I'm the director of finance at Sacred Circle Healthcare.
so the question regarding the VOA Geraldine E. King Women's Resource Center. We've actually worked with them since they took occupancy over at that facility. We've been working with their directors, offering them not only medical services for their clients, but also partnering with them in any way that we can to offer behavioral health groups, as well as any other services such as transportation to medical care.
And so people are spending the night in your facility. It's not like it's not people aren't coming from the homeless resource center over to your facilities, right? They're spending the night at your facility.
Correct. Yeah. The purpose of the group or the large group home use would be for them to detox from an opiate dependency and to be there until medically cleared.
So how do they actually get recruited to come to the facility?
It would be voluntarily. We'd also be working with University of Utah Hospital, LD Hospital, University Neuropsychiatric Institute, as well as...
We'll just walk up the door and
Well,
come in?
Well, they can. The biggest thing is meeting criteria. Often that's happening in the ED. And we also wanted to plan to work with the health department on their ED grants to opioid use dependence.
So ED being emergency?
Oh, emergency department. I apologize. Yeah.
So you have an emergency department in this facility?
We don't, but we will partner with those emergency departments in the Salt Lake City so that we can accept their criteria.
Thank you.
And your clients largely in the facility? Do they come and go? I mean, talk me through that, how the treatment plan kind of works, and
Yeah, you bet. You bet. So it's all based off of behavioral health models where we'll plan on doing groups. The patients will not be coming and going, but their family members can come and go. We'll have supervised security type visits where making sure that the safety of others is first and foremost the most important. We'll be able to plan different group models, not just one type of group, but social interactive groups, groups that allow to discuss on what the next step would be, like what we call a step down method. And then also meeting with physicians, group therapists, individual therapists, and being able to meet those needs of the patient to feel like they can acclimate themselves back into society without the need of the addiction or the want of to relapse.
And so then how long are they in the treatment program?
So that's all dependent on two things.
General.
Yeah, about 3 to 7 days.
3 to 7 days.
Yeah.
And then do they come back on a regular basis to kind of check in like you would with a doctor, or is it like, are they kind of like off on their own and they go to other medical facilities if they need just check-ins and whatever else after that?
So yeah, the biggest thing is the step-down method, and before you can discharge, the discharge treatment plan would be made. We have the services on our second floor to do follow-up care, as well as on our third floor to do behavioral health care. But the biggest
they're there
thing,
now, or they're not there?
They are there now.
They are there now.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
that's currently established. But the biggest thing upon discharging a patient from a detox facility is making sure that follow-up care is already set before they even step out of that building. And that means an appointment is set, a connection is made, and that there's a plan.
So I have a sort of physical question here. So this is on sort of a lower level of the facility, at the same level as the parking garage, or the. So how does that actually work? Are you entering? Does a pedestrian enter through the parking garage?
No, so this picture right here actually shows you the second floor, as you can see the ramp coming up.
Right.
So the actual use, you can see some windows right under by those shrubs.
Yes.
There's windows on both sides of the building.
Yes.
The entrance is actually, so this is behind the original parking garage. So there's the second floor parking garage, and right to the left or the west, oops, I went the wrong way, is this parking garage, and that's the gated, secured parking garage that we're going to be using, and that goes directly into the first floor. If you wanted to get down to the first floor from entry level, from pedestrian level, you'd have to take the elevators or some stairs, and then you'd be met by our admissions team and our security team once the thing's
Visitors would come through the parking garage?
They can come through. They'd come through the second floor, down the stairs to
Okay.
our area.
Or family could park in, that's a coded gate, and
Right.
and we would give code to the family members to be able to get into that floor, to be able to enter in through the garage
Okay,
also.
thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Yeah, one question. You mentioned that there was 24-hour supervision. I assume the personnel that works in this facility are all medical personnel?
Correct. Yes,
Yeah,
correct.
so we'll have a security person also, but that won't be medically, but we do have medical there all 24 hours.
Yeah, we'll have not only medical professionals, but also on-call services for those extra needs too.
And do you... No, that's good. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions for the applicant? Anything else you want to share with us about your program?
I'd love to just share that Sacred Circle comes from a company that's been started since 2012. We're a tribally owned company, so we're owned by the Confederated Tribes of the Ghost Chute Reservation, and that's mainly why our mission is being recognized to do something more for our tribal community. We're recognizing the needs of our tribe and the direction that services that our tribe is needing, and one is opioid use and the increase. We've seen in Utah, I guess in 2017, Utah said they were at 15.5% of opioid use among 100,000 individuals, and that's 1.3 higher than the national average. But the Native American population in Utah is at 14.3, which is right at the national average. So as we've been looking at services to increase for our tribal population, this one kind of hit home. This one kind of came really close to us to make us say, we need to do something different, and this is kind of how we're trying to act.
And it fits right in with our current model of healthcare, which is on the second floor located in that building, where we provide a wraparound service for all those types, and that will lead into this and help with this facility also.
And your clients you specifically work with the Native American community, or that's just where your background comes from? And anyone from the Salt Lake area can use your
Exactly.
services?
Yeah, anyone from the Salt Lake area. We're a Medicaid clinic, Medicare clinic, but our service and our mission is built around the owners of why we got started, and that's our Native American population. So we'll see any Native American tribe. It doesn't matter what tribe they're from. We'll see them, American and Indian and Alaskan Native, but then we also open up to the public.
And then I'll just ask my one last question, just because
please.
some of mine I'm trying to think how to make sure I'm saying it in a sensitive way, an appropriate way. But there was a lot of conversation around Pioneer Park and the concentration of homeless services and the people preying on vulnerable populations with drug dealing and other things. With this being located right next to Resource Center, do you see that being an issue or not, or do you guys address that or not? I mean, how talk me through this.
Yeah, so when the Women's Resource Center opened up, we saw an immediate increase in the homeless population coming around that area, which they knew that was going to happen. And so they've increased security. Our building owners, we're working with them to be in touch with the Salt Lake City Police.
And you were there before the center opened?
Yes.
How long have you been in that building?
Since 2012.
Okay.
Yeah. And so our building owners are currently in the process of getting more police services around that area. There's some certain things that they need to do, I guess, in order to do that. We're working directly with them in that case. I don't feel like there's 14 beds in this facility. There's 300 in the Women's Resource Center, and so it's a lot. It's a very small amount, and this is going to be very secure going in and out of that building through that gate. And
So
that's the only way
your
you get in.
patients come to you is very different than they're going to the Resource Center.
Yes.
And how okay.
Exactly.
And the Resource Center is predominantly women, where we won't have that exclusion.
Yeah,
It'll
we
be
have
male or
both.
female.
Thanks.
Any other questions? No? Okay. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Okay, we will open the public hearing for this item. Is there anyone here from the Community Council who wishes to speak? Is there anyone here from the public who wishes to speak? Okay, seeing none, we will close the public hearing. We can bring David back. Okay.
commissioners.
Just for the record, we did send information to, this it overlaps 3 community council areas, so it was Central City, downtown, and Ballpark. And we didn't get any comments from any of the community councils. We also held an open house for this item and didn't receive any public comment.
Okay, thank you for that.
I like a motion.
Thank you, Matt.
Based on the findings, information listed in the staff report, you're so happy about it. Listed in the staff report and the testimony of the plans presented, I move the Planning Commission approve the requested conditional use application PLN PCM 2019 01012, a conditional use for Sacred Circle Medical Recovery Facility subject to the conditions listed in the staff report.
Okay, motion by Matt.
A second.
Tied second. Second by John. I think I heard him first. All right, we'll move to a vote. Maureen,
Yes.
Carolyn,
Agree.
John,
Yes.
Brenda,
Yes.
Amy,
Yep.
Matt,
Yes.
Sarah,
Yes.
Andreas.
Yay.
Okay, motion passes. Good luck. Okay, item number 8, 700 North zoning map amendment, case number PLN PCM 2019-00923. And David is back.
Madam Chairman, I would like to ask that this item and number 9 be combined in terms of the staff presentation because they are so close to each other and are nearly the same.
That works for me. David, does that work for you?
Yep.
Okay.
My slides won't be in order, but I'll point some things out
Okay.
on them. So this is a zoning map amendment request, and the 2 different ones, the first one, PLN PCM 2019-00923. It's for these 3 contiguous parcels as shown on 700 North, just to the east of Redwood Road. And the other application, which would have the last 5 digits of 00986, is for the single parcel at 1612 West, 700 North, different applicant, and it would be, the mouse isn't showing, oh, there it is, okay. It would be the last parcel on the right. There's a CB zone parcel already in between the 3 non-CB, and so the other proposal is for this parcel at the end. So would be making that whole block face CB, and again, they are closely related. The first 3, 1616 West, 700 North, 1632 West, and 1640, the applicant said their intent was to consolidate the parcels to develop a commercial use. Total area of about 1.149 acres or 50,000 square feet. The last parcel is 0.28 acres or about 12,500 square feet, and as I said, different ownership. No specific site development plan was submitted with either application. The intent of the rezone in both cases is to match the changes to the Northwest Master Plan that was approved in 2004. That was a Planning Commission-driven petition to change that area around Redwood and 700 North into a commercial node with recognition that, given some of the residential in the area, that was a desirable area for more commercial uses. So City Council did approve those changes to the master plan. However, not all the parcels were rezoned at the time. So the change is asking to go to commercial. It's still zoned residential, so it is supported by the master plan. That's specifically what the master plan had envisioned. On the 3-parcel rezone, there's a number of small houses. This would be the one farthest to the west on the left, and then in the middle. And there's one more house, a little white one, before we get to the CB zoned parcel that kind of breaks up the 4 parcels, and that one's been developed as a dental professional office. It was rezoned in 2014 by the property owner of the most eastern parcel and was rezoned from R1 5000 to CB, and they developed a professional dental office use on it. Across the street, typical strip mall development pattern in the area on the south side of 700 South. Would point out that current CB zoning regulations wouldn't allow that front yard parking, so it would have a more attractive street face, and also concurrent with changes to the CB zoning district that were enacted in 2015. On the 3-parcel rezone, if they were consolidating those and making a larger commercial development, you would have to go through the design review process if it surpassed 7,500 square feet for a footprint or 15,000 square feet overall. So there would be an additional process during the development phase. Both cases, we looked at neighborhood and citywide master plans, that compatibility with adjacent properties. The housing mitigation loss, now since all of these parcels, both the 3-parcel and the single parcel rezone, have an existing single-family dwelling on them. When the property was redeveloped for like a commercial use, and if that housing is removed, they would have to pay into the housing mitigation loss fund that the city has. And we looked at alternate zoning districts, as we typically do with a rezone. Is there another zone that makes more sense? And in this particular context, given that the surrounding parcels are all zoned CB, and that was the applicant's request, it didn't seem to make any sense to look at another zone and introduce a different zoning that might cause some incompatibility in the development pattern of the block face. So staff's recommendation for both the PLN PCN 2019 00923 and 00986 is to forward a positive recommendation to the City Council for the proposed zoning map change from R5000 to CB.
Great, thank you, David.
David, I have some questions. So, because I'm concerned about, allowing more strip malls, I'm reticent to want to do that. So the parking would have to be in the rear.
Correct.
Is there, in the CB zone, is there a buffer setback to then what would be these residential homes in Ivy Circle? Is there, what's the provisions in a CB zone for that buffer?
Good question. Let me pull that one up. Off the top of my head, I don't remember what the rear yard setback is. Rear yard is a 10-foot setback, and any lot abutting a residential district would have some kind of buffering requirement in our landscaping chapter, so there would be some rear buffering required.
And I'm also wondering, when we require parking lots not in the front, which I think is a good thing, is there a requirement that, because we're looking at activating the street, that they actually need to have some entrances on the street? Because what seems to then happen is that becomes, all those doors get locked, nobody can actually walk in there, you have to access it via the parking lot. Because that's what they end up catering to. So how do we combat that?
Good question. I'm looking if we have a ground CB. I don't believe we have a primary entrance requirement in the CB zoning district on the street-facing side.
So they could theoretically just build a wall of windows
You would
that
hope
they
they
could
wouldn't,
block
but
off
correct.
and not have any real activation to the street.
Correct. CB zoning doesn't require that.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions for David? No. Is the applicant here? Applicants, do they wish to speak?
Okay, yes.
Okay.
While the applicant's coming up, Amy, to your question, most zoning districts don't have a primary entrance to the street requirement. Looking at the just base design standards section, which is 21A.37, for commercial uses.
including the Sugar House Business District.
Yeah, I know, and that's where I'm drawing my real-life applications from. So I'm wondering if in the future, planning can't look at how we address that, because I feel like, and I'm sorry to divert from you guys, but I feel like the motivation and the goal is to activate the street front, and we're missing that when we allow these back parking lot entrances. And so I'm hoping planning staff might start looking at how to properly address that, because definitely in Sugar House, that's what's happened. So, okay, thank
Okay.
Hi, so my name is Hawk Do. That's my mom, Anna. She owns the properties there too. I'm here to help her interpret too. But my mom wants to put a commercial property there. She wants to consolidate all the parcels like he was saying, but we just feel like there's not enough retail in the Rose Park area, and so that's why we want to put that there. The 3 houses that are on there now, I just feel like they are getting kind of old, you know, so we want to replace it with something that will revitalize the neighborhood a little bit, because I know a lot of people have been investing into that area a lot, and there's a lot of, not commercial, but residential that's being built in the area right now, especially by North Temple and Redwood Road. They're building a lot of high multifamily units. And so I just feel like if we put a retail space there, that the residents there can utilize the retail. And then I think it will offer, you know, when the business owners come in and they open businesses there, that the residents can have jobs, can provide jobs for people that are the locals in the area.
Thank you. Oh, no, continue if you have others.
Let's see. And I think it would help the area have more of a sense of a community to, you know, when the business owners come in and they open up maybe restaurants, salons or whatever, you know, it gives it a sense of community. Yeah.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant?
I'm the second applicant.
Oh, the second applicant, okay.
Shall I speak now?
Sure, yes,
And
please.
I'm also the owner of the commercial property in between our 2 properties. And I've been running a business there now for 5 years. We rezoned that property about 6 years ago. And now that I'm working down in Rose Park and half of my employees are from Rose Park, part of the reason I did that was because it was an underserved area, it needed another dentist. And so we have 2 more dentists down there now in that building. We had 4,000 dental appointments last year. Those patients would have had to have, if they couldn't get into the other dentist in Rose Park, would have had to go to Sugar House or downtown or West Valley. And our patients and employees are all really grateful and happy to have a community dentist there. There's a lot of other businesses we have on our list that we'd love to see there as well, including a coffee shop. And what's that? A candy store would be great. But, you know, Rose Park's a wonderful community with wonderful people, and they love their community. Sometimes they get overlooked, and so I think some small businesses in that, on that street would be, really help the community. Part of the reason I bought the corner property is because I wanted to clean it up. I would like to do just whatever it takes to make that the best use of space. Because it is a corner, it will have, you know, access from the Riverside Drive as well as 700 North. My current building does have a front entrance as well as a back entrance, and we utilize both of them. And it's been very successful that way as well. So,
Could you also please state your name for the record?
sorry, I'm Bethany Christensen.
Thank you. Okay. Any other questions or any questions? None? Okay. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Okay, we will now open the public hearing, and again, this is for both agenda items, PLN PCM 2019-00923 and 00986. Is there anyone here from the Community Council?
Not that I see, but for the record, I'll state this was sent to, and this one had 4 community council areas, the way it sits by a corner where they all meet. So Fair Park, Poplar Grove, Rose Park, and West Point, I believe. And we didn't receive comment from any of the community council chairs.
Okay, thank you, David. Okay. Is there anyone here who'd like to speak? Cindy?
My name is Cindy Cromer, and I'm wandering a bit far afield, but I think I've just heard something that I need to address. So the housing mitigation ordinance is a piece of junk. We haven't been able to fix it for over 20 years. It was developed in the Corradini administration, and it makes no sense because it generates negative numbers. I've asked, does that mean that the applicant gets paid by the city? So what I'm hearing from David's presentation is that there is a master plan here that calls for this node to develop and be CB, commercial, because the neighborhood needs that. Now, it makes no sense if the future land use is proposed for commercial to require property owners to pay into this dysfunctional housing mitigation ordinance that generates sometimes negative numbers. So I'm just asking you to the facts were just kind of coming at me, but if I'm hearing correctly that this has been master planned for commercial, then there should be no engagement, in my opinion, of the housing mitigation ordinance, which is my top of my list for dysfunctional ordinances. But there should be no engagement because the future land use map calls for commercial at this location, and the property owners should not be harassed or penalized. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here who'd wish to speak? Zach?
Zachary Dussault. I actually ride my bike by this property every day to and from work. And while I'm generally against the loss of housing, I do think that that intersection is a good spot for a business district. Something that hasn't really been brought up is that it is very accessible on the Jordan River Parkway Trail. And I don't know how many people in the neighborhood actually use that to access this area, but I have seen a lot of people in the neighborhood who walk, ride the bus, ride their bikes, and I think this could be a good spot for them to have some additional services in their community that they'd otherwise have to travel long distances for, either to downtown or other areas of the city. So I'm in support. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? No? Okay. Close the public hearing. Let's bring David back and ask him about the housing mitigation.
Okay, and for the record, I'll say the housing mitigation loss ordinance is not a planning ordinance. It was only mentioned in there for process clarification. It is something that we have to bring up, but it isn't a planning ordinance, so it's not in your purview.
Okay.
We can't change the ordinance?
Good to know. Any other questions for David? Would anyone be willing to?
I'll make a motion. Based on the findings, I had to beat Sarah to this one, right? Based on the findings and analysis in the staff report, testimony, and discussion at the public hearing, I move that the Planning Commission recommend that the City Council approve the proposed zoning map amendment file PLN PCM 2019-00923. What's the other one? Thank you. And PLN PCM 2019-00986 for the properties located at 1616 West, 700 North, 1632 West, 700 North, 1640 West, 700 North, 1612 West, 700 North, respectively. Proposed zone change from the R1 5000 single-family residential zoning district to the CB community business zoning district.
Okay, motion by Amy.
Second.
Second by John. Let's go with Andreas.
I agree.
Sarah.
Agree.
Matt.
Agree.
Amy. Amy.
Agree.
Brenda.
Agree.
John.
Agree.
Carolyn.
Yes.
Oh boy. Maureen.
Agree.
Poor people don't know your inside joke. Okay, motion passes. It's a positive recommendation. We're forwarding to the city council again. The city council has final approval for zoning map amendments, so they will hold the public hearing at a later date. So thank you all for coming and your applications. We're not done.
No,
we're not done. So, yeah. So for the truly fearless, we are here to talk about policies and procedures at 8:40.
Okay, I don't want to belabor this, and we will get you something in writing prior to the next meeting so you can review it in depth. But I will introduce it so that we can get a little bit of feedback and hopefully incorporate that into what our proposal will be, so we can get it done next time. So, for those of you who don't remember what I'm going to talk about, consent agendas. And we want the planning commission to consider changes to your procedures and your policies and procedures to enable the use of consent agendas for the purpose of meeting length management. It's very appropriate to talk about this tonight. So, as you know, we have a higher than normal volume of applications, and as we develop the easy sites, and there aren't that many left of those ones, the more complex ones are coming in the door, and they're going to come before this body. And then we also have a lot of a number of applications that maybe aren't so complex, but they still require a public process and come before the Planning Commission. And so the idea with the consent agenda is to specifically to talk about or to consider items where there's not a lot of, or there's little or no public opposition, and where we do not need, this is kind of like the final decision-making body. So a zoning change, you would still have that on a regular public hearing agenda section, because that's something that we need record that you discussed it and you're making a recommendation to the city council. But on items like a conditional use, where there's little or no public opposition or something like that. For example, an ADU, I know in the recently this commission expressed interest in not having to keep reviewing ADUs, where it's kind of the same thing and they're all meeting the standards, and otherwise we wouldn't bring them before you anyway. We're doing a lot of that work behind the scenes and not bringing you the problems. We're bringing you kind of the worked out solutions. So we're proposing a number of changes to the policies and procedures to enable the use of these consent agendas. I know Michaela spoke with Brenda and, Commissioner Scheer and Commissioner Bell about this the other day, and
Excuse me, Vice Chair.
our fearless leaders, you had a recommendation that when we have an item on a consent agenda, basically it would be a unanimous decision. So we would expect there to be no opposition even from within the commission on one of those items. And if there is, then it can get bumped within that at the discretion of the chair, not at the discretion of the chair, at the discretion of the commission, to the regular public hearing section of the administrative section of the agenda. So we would go through the rest of the regular process of staff presentation, applicant presentation, open the public hearing, that sort of thing.
If we were, if we were to apply this concept to tonight's agenda,
yes.
I mean, obviously the Lincoln Street thing would be the normal process. The revival design review, and there's like, does it get triggered because someone, like the neighbor complains? I mean, there's nothing we could do about this Simply Sushi thing. I mean, it's outside our scope. It's clearly a problem with him and his landlord. But would that, would that trigger, would that be a consent agenda item, or would we,
So-
because he was complaining, we would
I'll give you
do it here?
several considerations. One, a public hearing has already been held before the Planning Commission, and no substantial changes have been made to the application, or the changes that have been made have all been in response to the Planning Commission's direction. You've seen several work session items in the past or things like that. They've come back, made various changes, and there's not a lot of discussion at that point. Two, no comments have been received by the public in opposition to a land use application up to the date the agenda is posted. Three, the Planning Commission has determined that the proposal complies with all applicable regulations, that there are no known impacts from the proposal, and no information has been provided that demonstrates otherwise. Or four, the matter is necessary in order to comply with state or federal law, and applicable laws do not provide discretion.
So I guess clarification on the next meeting would be helpful for me. Not that I want to prolong the length of our meetings, but there's oftentimes when there's no public comments given and in our packet. And then like Cindy will come and give comments that night because it's something that triggered her or something. But there's oftentimes no public comment to it, so you may not think there's any opposition, and we find certain things that are important that we feel need to be addressed. And how would we still have that provision? I guess I'm just curious next time if you can clarify how, what would be the process that we would be saying, yeah, you can move that along, a unanimous consent. So I'm just curious of how that's going to spell out.
So right now, what we're working on is the procedure for how it would work. So right now, we're looking at the chair will announce each item, including the title of the application, the file number, and the address if it's a site-specific issue, and any other information necessary to relay to the audience that the commission is discussing that consent agenda. The planning director or designee may provide the commissioners with updated information about public input received on an item on the consent agenda. After this information has been provided, the commission may decide to move an item to the regular agenda. The chair will then open a public hearing, so you still have to have the public hearing, even if it's on a consent agenda, and ask the audience if there's anyone in attendance who would like to speak to an item on the consent agenda. If no one speaks up, the chair can close the public hearing for the consent agenda. If people are in attendance to provide input or hear about an item on the consent agenda, the Planning Commission may take one of the following actions. You can move the specific item that the audience member indicates that they would like to speak on to the regular agenda and proceed with deciding the other items on the consent agenda. After the comments are presented, the commission can decide by motion and vote to move an item to the regular agenda. So let's say we'll use Cindy as an example. She's our great example. She comes up and she said, this isn't a good idea. Here's why I think we need to talk about this, blah, 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 blah. Someone could say, hey, let's move this to the regular agenda. Let's have a presentation. Let's talk about it, discuss it. And we've heard the public hearing comments at this point, but is there anything else that you want to discuss?
So in the staff report, so in our packet, will we still get a staff report?
Oh, yes, you would still have a staff report.
It'd still be
all
public
that
and
is
all
still
that.
the record
Okay.
of the item.
No, it would be
That would be considered that same
at the
night.
end of the agenda.
Yeah.
So a good example would be that street closure today, where it's not really a street closure. We had to consider it, but nobody cared.
Except that that would
Oh,
be
that's-
one
we're
that
not
goes to
final.
the city council for
You're right.
recommendation.
Okay.
So there's,
Well, a good
I have-
example would be the ADU, actually. And so what you're saying is that it would be on the consent agenda. The chair would say, here's the ADU, it's on the consent agenda. Does anybody want to talk about it? Open the public hearing, right? And then nobody comes. Close the public hearing. And then I would say, perhaps that's the moment when you say, does any member want to bring it to the full agenda. And that's the point at which any member can bring it to the full agenda. Because it's
Well, that was
not
my
voted.
concern, whether
It's
it
not
should be
voted on
voted on.
because consent means unanimous consent. That's what it means, unanimous consent agenda. If we don't have unanimous consent, then
We still vote on things on the consent agenda, and it doesn't have to be unanimous to pass.
yeah, but it has to be unanimous to not be discussed.
I guess I'm still torn on that. I don't know.
I don't know how we can vote on it if we haven't talked about it.
Well, but all you're voting on is whether to keep it on the consent agenda or move it to the,
Yeah, but it's the unanimous consent agenda. Everything on the unanimous consent agenda is unanimous.
can a motion pass that's on a consent agenda if it doesn't get unanimous approval?
That person might bring up something that sways everyone else. It could be a great orator.
You can't talk about it unless it's on the agenda.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying if just the process to move it from consent to regular, that's the only thing I'm still not clear on, and what requirements we should have.
That would be something for them to clarify for the upcoming memo.
Yeah.
Who decides what goes on the consent agenda? Is it the chair or is it the staff?
That's a good question.
It would be something that we would basically propose. We usually go over the agenda with the chair and vice chair in a phone call prior to
Did the commission look
the
at
meeting.
something?
But at
Could
that
we
point,
make
usually
a-
the agenda's, at that point, usually set
Yeah, it's published,
and
right?
posted.
Yeah.
So, we might say, hey, there's 3 items for the consent agenda tonight, or in 2 days. And, that's something to consider. We can.
So staff's really making those choices when they set up the agenda. So then.
What?
Then when Amy looks at the staff report on one of those and has a concern, then it wouldn't be unanimous.
Right.
And you could ask for it to be moved to the regular agendas so that you could
Right
bring
at
up
the,
the issues
right,
that you're
even right at
concerned
the
about.
beginning of the discussion, so we wouldn't have this public meeting that would include that item.
Are you concerned that that prolongs the process for some applicants, that now they're bumped 2 more weeks because one of us was like, yeah, we want to.
It's the same day.
It's the same day.
Same day.
Oh, it would go.
all happening in the same day.
Oh, so we would just bump it to the regular part of the agenda,
Yep.
but it would
Stay
still
longer.
happen that night.
Yes.
Okay.
We'll stay longer that night.
It seems like from a
Amy?
staff management perspective, though, you would, if you don't need to go through all the rigmarole, I imagine these presentations take a certain amount of time to pull together. And if you don't have to, if we're going to consent and
But
move
they
through.
have to do that because it might get moved.
Well, but if you kick it off 2 weeks and it doesn't get,
Then you're kicking an applicant out 2 weeks. I don't know that that is necessarily a.
And
Yeah, yeah, they're-
and you're adding to the two-week coming agenda.
Well, I think the only risk is if you add a lot of items to the consent agenda and then all of them get discussed, then it just compounds the problem. To speed up and add more things to the agenda, I guess, to push them through?
Well, so tonight we had a lot of items on the agenda. And one of the things that we're trying to balance is how many items we put on an agenda. And I know that the commission in the past has requested like a maximum of 6. We're literally staring down the barrel of a number of meetings coming up that have more than 6. So we're trying to think about how can we take that burden off of you as a commission. And I realize we're still debating this at almost 9 o'clock. But how can we take some of that time burden off of you to say, okay, some of these should be a slam dunk, we're making the considerations as we're preparing
you know, as we're reviewing the application, as we're preparing the staff reports, and meeting with applicants and things like that, there's a lot of work that's going on behind the scenes so that when it comes to the commission, it should be smooth. At least for those, you know, I think some of the rezones are going to be more challenging anyway. And some of the other items that we had tonight where we have a lot more public comment. But the idea was to try and like move the meetings along more smoothly, try and cut out some of the extraneous stuff. You already have that information, you know, in your staff report. Do we need to reiterate it all again with a staff presentation and another 10 minutes for the applicant? And, you know, try and move things along. And then also, you know, with your request to be like, do we need to keep hearing these ADU things if there's nothing to talk about? You know, it was a way for us to propose a workaround because we're kind of hemmed in. You kind of have to hear it, but how can we hear it in like, you know,
Efficient manner.
most efficient way?
My comment, I guess I'd say, one, I think based on your criteria, looking at our agenda and trying to think through the last agendas, I think fewer items are going to hit that consent agenda than we hope. I'm all for
yeah.
this idea of having more of these. So consent agendas, like moving things quickly. It seems like to me, like even looking at tonight, like there's maybe the conditional use on the ADU and the Sacred Circle group home could have been moved.
But even then, for both of those items,
There were people that
we
came
had
forward.
written comments or phone calls or whatever where
So I
where
think,
people
but then some
had-
of them, like the street vacations we have, and some of these more like, those aren't going to trigger it because we're not the final decision-making body, and so you're going to miss the loop on some of those easy changes. To me, it would seem to be, like I would make it easy to get something on the consent agenda, easy for staff or for the commission to pull it off. Like, so one commission can be like, now we're going to pull that off because we'll talk about it, which is, we're all annoying to each other. It's fine. Like, we all have annoyed each other at one point. And we're all brave enough to piss off the rest of the members here. Like, we all have pissed each other off at some point. And so, like, the thought of us not doing it because you want to keep other people happy, like,
Kind of popularity.
it's not, no one here in this body, at least my whole time, is always willing to pull things. But it seems like you have it easy for a commissioner to move something off if they feel strongly about it. I mean, usually this body has always deferred to someone if they feel strongly about something to hear them out. And then I would, just make it easy. I mean, that's my big kind of thing. Make it easier to move things on and off of it, and then unanimously approve and move forward.
And I think you're right that there's so many things we're getting that do have lots of public comment that it's a great idea, but it might not functionally work that way.
Yeah, it might not, but I was wondering if one of the things for even some of these rezones, like the street vacation, is there a way that, we can say, oh, we don't need to hear from the applicant? Like we're going to be good. I don't know. I don't want to take away their voice, but what happens when people are, I have 10 minutes. I'm going to talk for 10 minutes because they just fill it and they don't realize. And so I think there's some time issues that can be totally taken away as if, we don't have any questions for the applicant on these slam dunks, but we still have to vote on it because it's a rezone and we're just recommending. I don't know. It's just a thought of where sometimes I feel like, this is going to be a really easy one. I don't know that we need to hear 10 minutes of that.
Not just the applicant, but we can control the staff report. And I mean, even tonight, some of the staff report, we had all these meetings, nobody showed up, we didn't get any public comment. We read all that. We don't need to hear any of that again. That is a way to say in 3 sentences, you guys have read the report, here are the 3 little highlights. If you have any questions, we'll address it after.
Yeah, I wonder if staff can kind of designate, your categories. Slam dunk, may require some stuff. This is going to be a long one.
And if the, you know, and then
And-
That's prejudging. I thought David's presentations were
No, they're great.
very good and succinct, and they really moved through.
No, David moved through a lot. We moved through a lot tonight.
All the staff did.
Yeah.
the staff is great. I'm not complaining. I'm saying if we're looking for ways to be a little more efficient, that is a way.
So that's what I was saying.
Nobody
If,
else wants to do it,
if
that's
staff
fine.
has, internal criteria of like what category this one's going to fall in, and then you can adjust the staff presentation accordingly. Like, oh, this is a slam dunk. What do you want to know, or something? I don't know. Where sometimes it seems to get long is in a staff report for a slam dunk that just kind of really keeps going on, and then 10 minutes for an applicant where we're just like, we're good. This is a no-brainer. So I don't know.
If we could vote by acclamation, I'm gonna put a total tangent in there and not have to do the roll call. I think that would be great to move some of this. I mean, it's not a ton of time, but it's 10 or 15 minutes we spend doing the roll call. For some of these things like the minutes and like all of it, we could just.
That's an Open and Public Meetings Act thing. I'm sorry. I'm not a big fan of it, but that's.
Can we just raise our hands? Like if we all raise our hands at the same time? You have to say it? No.
Well, you could all raise your hands, but it's gonna be a challenge for Marlene to figure out who
Yes,
calls
yeah.
vote. Everybody keep your hands up.
Yeah.
So.
No, my only question would be if there's 20 items and they all get pulled for that meeting, do we just push off to the next meeting half of it, or how would that work? Or would we just stay here till 1 a.m.?
We'll add an extra meeting each month on a Saturday.
Okay, perfect.
Usually we push as much. I mean, this maybe Molly can answer better, but usually stuff gets pushed.
I always
as
just
much
look at
as
worst
possible.
case scenario, so I was just curious.
Well, and I think that's actually a really good question, because if we're staring down the face of people waiting for 2 or 3 months to get in front of us, I mean, I don't have any idea what that lead time is, because that's not something you guys tell us or talk about. But
It's months.
and now, and if we're not willing to sit through another 3 or 4 more meetings like this one, for the next 3 months.
It's the curse of being a developing city.
Yeah,
I mean,
it is kind of the curse of being a developing
I
city.
am personally going to say that I would like to not have these type of meetings consecutively, but I also realize that's what I signed up for when I volunteered and got appointed, and so it is what it is, and I appreciate the consideration, but at some point I feel like this is what our job is.
It's true, and there is, this time of year, there is a little bit of lag, because there was only one November meeting, one December meeting, and so the
We can
January,
stop doing
February
that.
tends to be pretty heavy. I think one of the things that we're struggling with too is city-initiated petitions tend to get pushed and pushed and pushed, because we know we've got to get the applicants in front of the commission, because we have certain standards of practice, but also, they have some rights to get in front of you in a timely manner as well. And so the city stuff gets pushed, and we're like, oh, now we can't address, the fire access stuff that we want to address, because that gets pushed out, or, the parking chapter could have come before you sooner, but, things like that we would like to, and, then there's like big ones like the parking chapter that we do want you to discuss, and then you've got a meeting with 6 or 7 other items, and you don't want to discuss parking at that kind of length after going through all of those other items. So that's, one of the things that I think we're really challenged with the number of applications that we have going on, and what needs to come before the planning commission.
So 8 a.m. Saturday morning, that's what I'm hearing. And Paul's going to bring donuts.
Every week now instead of every other week.
Yeah.
Donuts.
Yeah,
and
I would say
coffee and-
if reducing our schedule in November and December creates this backlog, I would personally be in favor of just finding more meeting times
in November and December, even if it's not on our scheduled night. You know, just build that into the calendar. I don't know how others feel.
The challenge with that is members' availability.
No, understood, but if that is
We're not
set,
gonna have something on.
right, but if we set that at the beginning of the year and we know, like, November 2020, we're going to meet on the first Wednesday and the second, or I don't even know when we meet anymore. I just look at my calendar.
Yeah.
Whenever it
Second
says
Wednesday
second
and the
Wednesday,
fourth
fourth
Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Could add a meeting in there.
Yeah, you add a meeting on the third
So
Wednesday
you meet
instead
2
of the
weeks in a
fourth.
row
Yeah.
instead of.
Or we just double them up like that last one. I felt like that worked pretty well. Just a joke.
Yeah, but that would be my thought.
So what about the consent agenda? Do we,
I think
do we
we-
think that's a good idea, or do we have
I
the
think we
rapid
should-
fire agenda
I think
instead?
what we'll do is we'll try and work through some solutions, some alternatives, and we'll present it to you at the next meeting if we think it's worthy of discussion. And if not, then we'll try and figure out some other fixes in terms of staff presentation and what have you.
I would go back to the last couple of agendas and just give us a list of these are the ones that would have been on the consent, and then we could have moved
that
quickly
might-
on.
okay.
I mean, I think it'd be
Good
super
way to look
telling
at
for
it.
us to just put this
Yeah.
in practical terms. We've had a pretty good swath of stuff come through since the beginning of the year even, that is all gonna be somewhat fresh in all of our minds.
Okay, anything else? No, all right. Well, let's adjourn then. Thank you.
Thank you.